Hey everybody, good afternoon and welcome in to Clio Sports and Bleacher Report's virtual event, the new Sports Marketing Playbook. I'm your host, Kristen Ledlow. You may know me from NBATV or the NBA on TNT. Well, that was before I had a baby due in just a few weeks, but I will be back at some point soon, and it's great to at least virtually see all of you. I'm coming to you live from Atlanta, and I'm going to be your virtual host both today and tomorrow, leading you through the programming for each of these days. And we've got so much ahead planned for you guys. I know that this year has been entirely unprecedented in so many ways. We've all had to navigate our way through a global pandemic. We're fighting for jobs and for new ways in which to do our jobs. And one thing I know that everyone, at least watching this, can relate to is how we all felt when the sports industry came to a halt. It wasn't just painful as a fan to miss watching your favorite sporting events, but also the sports marketers who had to throw out their entire playbook that had worked for years and years and seasons, and you had to reinvent the wheel. So all of this was happening. And while it was, the Clio Sports Awards and Bleacher Report teams got together virtually, of course, and decided to find the silver lining in all of this. And thus, the new Sports Marketing Playbook was born. And here we all are. So this event is going to bring together leaders from every corner of the sports marketing industry. We're going to discuss the lessons that this year has taught all of us and how we can apply this playbook to map out future victories. Get it? That's a sports pun. So here's what you guys can expect from today and tomorrow. We're going to ask some tough questions. They're going to be asked. We're going to confront modern issues in sports head on. We're going to delve into the future of sports advertising and what happens around it. We're going to talk about race and accountability and the ways in which change is determined to come. We're going to talk to legends. We're going to honor those who make a difference, not only on their respective fields in the world of sports, but also off their playing fields and in their communities. We're also going to reflect on the best sports marketing and advertising of the last year, and we're going to invite you all to check out the winners of the 2020 Clio Sports Awards. Seriously, they were just announced, so go check them out at clios.com. I'll wait. I'd also like to give a special shout out to our sponsors and partners, to AT&T, Iberia Bank First Horizon, and Aquimo, and of course our supporting partners as well, XL Sports Management, Octagon, Athlete by Impact, and Society Awards. Now we've got a really fun day planned, so put on your favorite sweatpants. That's what I've had on for months. You guys can't see. That's why we do. That's why we're only aiming from here up, you know? Grab your favorite midday snack and, well, speaking of favorites, stick around to find out the winner of the Clio Sports and Bleacher Report Fan Favorite Sports Ad of the Year, one of my favorite parts of what we're going to be doing in the next 48 hours. So for more Clio Sports Awards coverage, follow us on social media at Clio Awards, and don't forget to follow at Bleacher Report for your daily sports fix. Now, first up, we've got Rise of the UGC, where experts on the ground are going to talk about how players help to lead the engagement during this global pandemic and how they're going to continue to do so in the future.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to your 300,000 Zoom call of 2020. Excited to be here alongside some really excellent esteemed panelists. So today we're talking about a shift that's taking place within the world of sports. It's a shift of power and influence and away from leagues and entrenched media companies and towards the players themselves. There are a lot of ways that the pandemic has reshaped sports and culture and society this year, and a lot of that we won't be able to cover in this 30 minutes, but this is a really interesting topic that is definitely something that we'll look back on 2020 as a huge part of this year, and I think it'll continue moving forward. So before I go on, I wanted to just introduce our panelists, who thank you so much for joining us. Oh, and thank you to the Clios for having us. I'm really excited. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Will, we'll start with you.
Hey everyone, I'm Will Yoder. I work on the Instagram Sports Partnerships team. We focus on basically serving as consultants to the sports world to make sure everybody understands how to get the most out of using all of our tools on Instagram, whether they're athletes, leagues, teams, or media entities. I've been here about 5 years, been able to work on some really cool things like the launch of Stories, IGTV, and now Reels. And yeah, excited to talk about athletes and social today.
Excellent. Thank you. Caroline.
Hey everyone, I'm Caroline. I lead our athlete partnerships team at YouTube. I've been at YouTube now for a little over 4 years and have basically built out our athletes business on the platform. So very excited as well to be here and talk with you all. And thank you, Nate, Bleacher Report, and Clio for having me.
Great. Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Thank you to the Clios. I'm Doug Bernstein. I'm currently the general manager of House of Highlights. I've been with Bleacher Report for 10 years, oversaw the social for BR for about 3 or 4 of those, and then moved over to overseeing House of Highlights, which I've done for the past 3 years. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have some trailblazers and thought leaders in this space, so let's get into it. Okay, so just to set up this trend a little bit, I wanted to highlight 2 examples that to me kind of encapsulate kind of what we're talking about here. So one is a really striking piece of data from Instagram. Will shared this with me before, but basically, so there's 400 million sports accounts, sports fans on Instagram. On average, they follow about 10 accounts. And from that, you can imagine, it's a mix of leagues and teams and Sports Center and all these different accounts that are on Instagram. And you would probably imagine, or in years past, you could imagine a broad sampling of athletes kind of within those categories. But this year, the data shows that 8 out of 10 of those accounts that the sports fans follow are athletes. So that really shows that sports has become personal and personalities are driving, and the athletes themselves are really at the center of it. The second is more anecdotal, observational. So, of the teams that came back, of the leagues that came back this summer, I think most people would say that the NBA was among the most successful in kind of recapturing culture and the sports world. I mean, the NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup the other day, and I don't think it even made the headlines on ESPN. So, but the NBA was different, and of the things that people were talking about following the NBA, especially early on when the games were just kind of picking up, it wasn't highlights, it wasn't hot takes from Stephen A. It was the players themselves. So, Matisse for the 76ers, JaVale on the Lakers, these players vlogging their way through the bubble, and all the clips that were picked up of Big Face Coffee and Jimmy Butler on Instagram, and obviously all the amazing content we shared on House of Highlights. And you could see how modern sports is really distilled through the athlete's perspective, and nowhere was that more clear than in the bubble. So just to kind of set up kind of where we're headed today, I want to talk about where this came from, how it's impacting the sports landscape right now, and where we're headed. So first question for the panelists. So I want to hear a little more about how this trend has played out on your platform. So did you predict that in 2020 athletes would begin to have the power that we're seeing them have, and what aspects of this trend has surprised you? So Will, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So prior to coming to Instagram, I actually worked at Octagon as the head of digital for the athlete representation business they had. And I worked with athletes really closely on their social media. And they would always give me the logins for all of their accounts to kind of help them with whatever they need to do. But they would not give me access to their Instagram because it was so personal to them and so important to them. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to come to this company, because I knew it was a place where there's a lot of authentic athlete content. They're actually on that account. They're talking to their fans. They're talking to their colleagues, the fellow athletes on Instagram. So there's a great social thread that exists on Instagram, which I think makes it really special. I think we've also really focused on tools that specifically are helpful for athletes, right? Tools like Stories and Instagram Live, they're ephemeral and they're very lightweight. They're very easy to use. The same way that the 5 of us on this panel would use those tools, the same way athletes use them to reach millions of fans. So it really plays to their strong suits of just being casual and being themselves and sharing their everyday moments. But it has definitely taken off like crazy this year. With COVID, people were forced into their homes, and athletes had to figure out how to use just their phones to reach their fans. And Instagram was a natural place, especially Instagram Live. one of the craziest stats that we saw during that time period was during the first month of the shutdown, we saw athlete live viewership go up 600% on Instagram during that 1 month period, which is pretty incredible. But yeah, we've always felt that athletes feel at home on Instagram, but it has definitely gone supercharged this year for sure.
And Caroline, what aspects of this have been surprising to you or that you kind of saw coming? How is it playing out on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, YouTube has really been building out. I mean, if we're taking sort of the 10,000 foot view, like YouTube has really been building out a sports destination for a long time. I mean, we've been working with leagues and teams and broadcasters to really make YouTube become this sort of home of highlights. So we've really built this sort of destination where fans come to YouTube to watch and consume sports content. And so it's really sort of only a natural transition in the sense that now athletes are sort of taking advantage of that audience. And so it's really interesting to see the, rate at which athletes are starting YouTube channels to not only sort of engage with that existing audience, but also sort of create and drive a new audience for fans that may not know them and are now discovering them through YouTube.
That's excellent. And Doug, House of Highlights is obviously, you saw this trend coming miles away, and your success in large part has been as a result of the athletes becoming more, in front of their fans and sharing more of their lives. So what have you seen in 2020 from the House of Highlights perspective about the power of athletes?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is, this transition is definitely something that we've seen coming for some time. And the way we look at it is there were traditional papers that kind of shifted to digital publishers that kind of moved to personalities. The reason why Bleacher Report purchased House of Highlights was because House of Highlights sat more in the middle of between a publisher and a personality. And, people knew the voice behind the account. And that was a big part of, why Bleacher Report looked to invest in House of Highlights was this kind of overarching shift in consumption towards personalities. And athletes has played a really, really critical part in that as well, and has played a really critical part in the foundation of House of Highlights' success. So when you think about the first big video that really went viral on House of Highlights, it wasn't actually an NBA clip. It wasn't something from the leagues. It wasn't, something from a kid in the backyard, which is, House of Highlights has done really well. It was actually Kyrie in his house dunking on a in-home hoop in his living room. That was the first clip that really blew up on House of Highlights and really helped establish the account. So for House of Highlights, we've really tried to establish ourselves in two ways. One is being really celebratory of athletes and also being really relatable and helping athletes tell their stories. So you've seen, that trajectory, play out more and more as Will and Caroline alluded to. More and more athletes are taking to Instagram, taking to YouTube, taking to TikTok and Twitter and other platforms and getting their content out there. And that has served House of Highlights really well. We've been able to utilize that content to put forth, to kind of populate our pages, to not be as reliant on kind of the traditional means of posts that we would have had in years past. And that's really been something that's been encouraging. I think we've done that alongside the athletes. We kind of developed really, really good relationships with athletes. So being able to not just kind of take their content, but really amplify their message in their own voice, I think has been something really critical.
So, Will, when you look back at 2020, what is one of the most salient examples of an individual athlete or a moment in sports culture that kind of exemplifies this trend on Instagram or elsewhere?
Yeah, I would say two come to mind. I think very early in the shutdown, Instagram Live, as I mentioned, just blew up, and superstars decided to host their own live shows on IG Live because it was so lightweight and so easy. So Steph Curry did a couple of lives where he was basically doing a game show, pulling in different NBA stars and asking them silly questions to go find things in their house. Just had fun with it. Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade did wine tasting together on IG Live, which is really fun and personal. You could imagine as a fan just being brought into their homes and having this experience and maybe having your own glass of wine with them. The other obviously important piece is, the discussion around racial justice that has been incredibly important, especially in sports, and how athletes have taken to Instagram to really have their voices be heard. I think one of the ones who has done the best is Lewis Hamilton. He's really just been out there telling his story, having his POV heard, especially in a sport where, he's one of the few people speaking out on that issue. So I think those are the two that definitely kind of highlighted on Instagram, at least for this year.
Nice. And Caroline, what about on YouTube?
I think you sort of stole my thunder in the beginning, Nate, in the sense that I would really say that the content coming out of the NBA and WNBA bubbles was really, really I think probably best exemplified this trend in 2020, in the sense that, again, you sort of illustrated JaVale McGee and Matisse Thybulle. And then I'd also love to highlight sort of Isabel Harrison. I think that the three of them really took advantage of this opportunity where they were able to own that narrative and own that moment and really connect with fans in a different and unique way. I think they were able to provide really unique insight, show off their personality, and kind of own that voice. And it's just incredible to see just how that has taken off. JaVale, I think, was at sort of like 40,000 subscribers, and then through his vlogs is now well over 600K. He actually just posted even, a couple hours ago, and they're, gearing up to be in the NBA Finals. And Matisse as well, I think his is really interesting, not only for, he's a 76ers rookie that no one really knew, and now through his YouTube channel has become sort of more of a household name. But it's also, gained recognition from some of our sort of YouTube OGs, in a sense that Casey Neistat loves his editing and wants to collab with him. So I think it's been really incredible to see these athletes take advantage of this moment, think about YouTube as the platform that they can sort of tell these longer stories. And the content did extremely well. I mean, just from their content alone, it was, drove over 30 million views. So I think it just shows that, there's a ripe audience, a unique moment, and they really took advantage of it.
Yeah, that's great. I saw on Twitter, Casey Neistat tweeted, Matisse is now like mostly a creator and secondarily a basketball player, which I don't know how coach would feel about that, but I think it's great.
And Matisse now, I think, which is amazing, seeing the value, is he's now doing the off season. So because his, bubble content did so well, he's now using his platform to really create content in the off season and really trying to connect with fans globally.
Nice. And Doug, I promise to stop putting you last, but yeah.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think, it's for us, three really interesting categories. So I think the first was when, the pandemic first happened and everybody was stuck in their house. I think a lot of the content that the athletes were putting forth was really interesting. And there was this really cool feedback loop. So for example, on House of Highlights, we featured a video of a kid in his house throwing water bottles into garbage cans. And he kind of did like a little 3-point loop around his house. We were then able to kind of reach out to Trae Young, who we have a good relationship. He immediately was able to film something on his end and, filmed it and then kind of do his version, posted to his account, to House of Highlights. Same with Dwayne Wade. And it was kind of this really cool way for like the athletes and the individual people in their house to come together and create something that was entertaining. We actually saw like our performance go up significantly during the early days of the pandemic, largely because of the creativity both from the athletes and the individuals in their house, and how all those things kind of came together in a really, really unique way. So I think that's the first kind of example of something that I thought was particularly interesting. I think the second is what Will noted too, the athletes being able to be outspoken as relates to racial and social justice issues without having a filter. I think if you look at what Jaylen Brown in particular did, kind of really being a leader, not just as it relates to athletes, but as it relates to everybody on those issues, and being able to have Instagram as a platform to be able to express his feelings and be on the front lines, and for people to be able to just kind of have a window into that is really, really, truly amazing. And I think the third is just what you continue to see every day is kind of this feedback loop between the athletes, the publishing platforms, and the comment section, right? So much of the focus is often on the videos and the individual posts or the stories. But then there's this whole other ecosystem that happens in the comments that's really, really unique. So when something happens in a game, and it's featured on House of Highlights or Bleacher Report, you see athletes comment on it. And it really is this really cool lens into how athletes think about their highlights, how they engage with one another. A really cool example recently was Tyler Hero. After the Heat made the finals, Bleacher Report posted this really funny meme. Tyler Hero was like, "You got to get that one at me." Bleacher Report sent it to him, and then he posted it on his page. And it is just this really cool experience to feel like you're in that inner circle with the athlete. They have their own control of the narrative. They're able to interact with publishers and their fans. And that's just something that has never really existed. When you think about SportsCenter being such a passive experience with linear TV, that's how I grew up. And now, as a fan, you're able to not only watch the highlight, see how the player's commenting on it, and then see how he's engaging with his teammates on it. That's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. And just to finish off the story about Trae Young shooting water bottles into waste paper baskets, we our production company at Port LA actually saw that trend happening, and we built this format called Ultimate Home Championship, kind of around athletes, messing around in their living rooms and getting competitive with one another, and ended up, working with YouTube on it as a show. So, it's definitely like bubbles up within culture and then finds other manifestations. It's cool. So moving on, I wanted just a question for Caroline. Athletes gaining more influence and power, we're seeing it all over social media, but a lot of people don't really understand kind of what impacts that's having sort of behind the scenes on whether it's the business of sports or the way the platforms are looking at athletes. What are some impacts, kind of like downstream impacts, that the average fan might not be aware of how athletes are kind of reshaping sports at a broader level?
Yeah, no, I think, as a lot of folks have said to date, I think it's incredibly powerful how athletes are using their platform to really connect with new audiences. And I think so often, right, like the average sports fan really just sees athletes as like, what are their stats? How did they do on the court or their field? But I think through using YouTube and other social platforms, these athletes can now sort of showcase the sort of different multifaceted aspects to their personality. And really through sort of the longer form storytelling of YouTube, I think they're able to sort of do that in a way that often sort of a tweet or a photo can't really sort of showcase that depth. I think probably one of the best examples of athletes doing this is Cam Newton. Love him or hate him, he can definitely be a little bit of a polarizing figure on the field. But I think through his YouTube channel, he's really shown this other side of him that I think many fans don't get to see. So, for example, last season with Carolina, he had a really terrible foot injury, and he was sidelined for the rest of the year, put on the injured reserve list. And in a very typical Cam fashion, instead of sort of just posting a photo or doing something that's, I'm out, he instead created a YouTube video where he spoke, from the heart about what happened, how he was feeling. And I think, he sort of started the video lighting a cigar, pouring a glass of wine, and kind of talking openly, talking from the heart. And I think that was really powerful. So then if you looked in all, the comment section, that fans were actually saying like, get well, Cam, we can't wait for you to be back on the field. Like, we're really proud of you. It wasn't sort of the usual trolls that are like, you're over the hill and you're never going to come back. And I think because he was so authentic and so honest and really was like, look, this is the real me, that it really resonated well. And I think that is sort of a perfect example about how, athletes are able to use these platforms to sort of show off more than who they are just on the field.
Hard cut to Bill Belichick at home being like,
Exactly.
Nice. So Will, tell me a little bit about how the leagues play into this, because you work with both leagues and players, and leagues often find themselves kind of caught in the middle of social media storms, like on the negative side, which we don't have to go into, but like the Antonio Brown situation and how that was so public on social media, and how the league kind of had to like respond in real time. And then there are obviously like many positive examples of how the players are kind of uplifting the leagues. But how have you witnessed the leagues respond to this new era of athlete power and influence? And
Yeah, I mean, the NBA was definitely first movers in this space, really just saying, look, we want our athletes to get as much content as possible on their social channels, because the brighter they shine, the brighter the league shines. And as a result, you can see NBA athletes specifically are by far the most followed U.S. athletes, bar none. Many of them are actually larger on Instagram than competing leagues are on Instagram. And LeBron has a larger following on Instagram than the NBA does, which is pretty incredible. The NBA, I believe, is the most followed league on Instagram right now. And I think since then, you've seen all the other leagues say, hey, like the NBA is growing because their athletes are growing, and that their athletes are growing in many ways because of their social media presence. So now you see all the leagues that we work with have player social teams built in, designed to make sure these athletes have the resources to know how to be successful on the platform, and even shooters on the ground creating content bespoke to them so they can have it on their social channels. I mean, I think back to when I was at Octagon, and we considered it a huge win if the Warriors would send us a highlight clip that we could post on Steph Curry's Facebook page, where now there are literally people on sidelines taking shots with phones or cameras that are like very different than broadcast angles, that they're literally feeding to athletes via platforms like Socially and Open Doors, so they can post it directly on their own channels. So I think that's a huge win that all these leagues are investing in this. And I think if you look on more globally at the global landscape, global football clubs have been doing this for a while as well. And that's why many global footballers are the most followed people on the platform. lot of people don't realize Cristiano Ronaldo is the most followed person, period, on Instagram by a large amount. And the only 3 athletes with over 100 million followers on Instagram are global footballers. So I think the clubs globally have done an amazing job of helping build their athletes' brand as well.
That's great. Doug, question for you. So, and this is one you'll probably be able to sink your teeth into because it's about the kind of old guard of sports publishers and sports media. The image of on SportsCenter that always made me laugh was of the host with like a tweet on a big screen behind them, with like the athlete saying whatever of the day. And it was just so clear that they were trying to make this new medium kind of work for their entrenched, the way they've presented sports news for so long. And it was an awkward mismatch. So what you've seen, how have kind of the sports media landscape and sports media publishers evolved, adapted, reacted to the era of athletes being kind of in control, and who have been some of the winners and losers in that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. So I think, in terms of how sports media companies have evolved, one, I think, they've had to become more native on the platforms themselves, right? If you're going to create on YouTube, or if you're going to create on, Instagram or TikTok or for these platforms, you really have to create content that doesn't feel like a TV show repurposed for these social platforms. Each one has its own identity. Each one has its own content that resonates specifically for that. So I think that the publishers and the digital media and the media companies that have successfully adapted to that reality, I think they have done well. I think in terms of the athletes themselves and how people need to account for, media companies need to account for that change, is I think about ourselves on House of Highlights. Our most successful show is a YouTube series that we have that's called The Reel, where we have NBA players react to their own highlights. And normally that would be something, that you just have broadcast announcers doing and just saying like, hey, here's a highlight, we're going to react to it, right? But what we've really seen our audience gravitate towards is the individual athletes themselves and put them in a position where they can react. They're natural. They're not, in a suit or tie. It's not like a moment out of the game. We're trying to get them in their house or get them in a comfortable environment, and really just make it a fun collaborative experience where it's like, hey, we have some fun highlights we want to show you. What did it feel like when you dunked on, LeBron or whoever? Not that many people get a chance to dunk on LeBron, but, we were able to sit down with Dame Lillard and, talk to him about what that moment felt like when he hit the three and just do it from his house. We were able to do an interview with Boogie Cousins where we talked about that moment where him and Joel Embiid are like slapping each other on the behind, and just to see him laugh and enjoy watching that. That's something that normally, wouldn't happen because I think there's a lot of constraints with, athletes and being put in front of, what they can say, what they can't say, and how you construct that content creation. So I think the companies that have really allowed athletes to speak authentically, to be their true selves, I think those are the ones that have had success. I think, you look at a Bleacher Report, you look at a House of Highlights, I think we've done pretty well as it relates to that. I think if you look at, some of our competitors as well, I think there's a lot of people that have done good work. I think Overtime's done a really nice job with younger athletes, allowing them a platform. I think the Players Tribune, has had really a good run, allowing individual athletes to kind of be able to get what they want out there via, written text. So I think there's been and I should say video content as well, but I think, there's been a lot of good examples of platforms that have done that. But I think, as much as anybody, this conversation has really been focused on traditional athletes. When you really think about, a whole new generation of athletes, esports and things of that nature, that's when the door opens up. So I think for me, the media company that maybe has done it best is FaZe. I'm really, really envious of what they've accomplished, how they've looked to rethink, what a sports media company is. And I think they've just kind of pivoted the framework, and I really look up to and admire what they've done.
Completely. Okay, and I want to talk a little bit about the business of sports and some of the brand deals that underlie a lot of this content. So for Will or Caroline, how have you seen traditional endorsement relationships between brands and athletes be reshaped in this new model where athletes are constantly putting out stuff? They have a slate of projects. they're like entertainment platforms in their own way. And how has that changed the way they work with brands?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see it evolve, especially since when I was on the other side of the house, actually working with these deals on the athlete representation side. And it would always pain me that at that time, social was just a throw-in to finalize a deal, right? It was, okay, let's get this across the finish line. Here's 10 tweets, 2 Instagram posts, done. And not a lot of thought went into what that content would be. And a lot of time it just was taking advertorial that existed for some print campaign and putting it on social. And that's not really leveraging any power of social media whatsoever. So it's been really amazing to see how, especially with this year and the lack of physical availability of these athletes, but even just the last few years in general, brands have realized, oh, if we want to actually engage with this audience that we're paying to be a part of, let's create content that will do well on those platforms and make sense on those platforms and feel authentic on those platforms. Nate, I know I talked to you about this, but the Steph Curry Britta song is still stuck in my head, right? And that was who knows how many years ago. But that's like a perfect example of like the type of content that natively lived in that platform perfectly. Another thing on our end that's really interesting is the rise of Instagram shopping, which is which is incredibly popular right now. But we have a tool that's rolled out in the last year or so called Shopping from Creators, which actually allows athletes to tag products on behalf of their brand partners. So you can imagine someone like Donovan Mitchell, instead of posting, a photo of a shoe and saying, hey, go to Adidas website or a store near you and check out this shoe, and feeling very advertised and directed, just having a really cool photo of you wearing your new sneakers and a caption talking about how much that signature sneaker means to you. It's your first signature sneaker, right? Talking about what it means and what your input was on the design. And then there's the ability to tap that photo, learn more, and buy directly on Instagram. So I really think Instagram shopping is going to represent a huge new wave of what we previously thought of branded content, but really just sponsorship activation, especially for consumer product goods on our platform moving forward.
Yeah, and just to kind of chime in on that, I think Will hit the nail on the head in terms of sort of this evolution of branded content. It used to be exactly as he said. It was a brand saying, here's a 30-second, just repost it, like call it a day. And I think what's really interesting is to see how athletes are now partnering with brands and sort of have their own voice, in the sense that they now are bringing something to the table about how they want their individual brand represented in partnership with that brand. And I think the first thing I always say as it pertains to YouTube is, build that audience first before you start sort of extracting value from it. Like, I think it's very important for an athlete, if they're launching a YouTube channel, not to just say, here's branded content piece number 1, number 2, number 3, because you're not going to see that viewership and not going to see that engagement. It's really important for them to sort of build that audience first, really sort of connect with their audience, and then start saying, okay, what is now the content that, works, and sort of how can I now layer brand into that? And I think someone doing this really well is Daniel Ricciardo as well. I think, speaking again to kind of global athletes, he is basically doing a behind the scenes series during this, crazy Formula One season. And instead of, saying, all right, like, I'm now going to just create this content on its own, he's worked with his new brand partner, Thorne, to have them come in and sponsor this series. And the reason it's doing so well and driving, thousands and thousands of views is because it's good content first, and there's an authentic brand integration. And that's what sort of allowed this great win-win between Daniel and Thorne. And I think that's sort of really important as these athletes sort of take these brand partnerships forward and use their platform to really create authentic content.
Yeah, and I think about that for House of Highlights as well. When you look at 2019, there's a website called Brandtail that tracks the top 100 or the top, best performing branded content on social media platforms. And House of Highlights was actually responsible for 51 of the top 100 best performing branded videos on all of Instagram. Thank you, Will, for having your platform. It's great. Carolyn as well. We definitely do very well on YouTube as well. So thank you guys for the platforms. But, I think if you look at, the success that we have in the videos, and that was not just sports, that was across all branded videos on Instagram. A lot of the success of successful content, the most successful branded content that we did was in partnership with athletes. So we did something with Gatorade with Kristen, where we created this kind of viral UGC moment that looks like it's just kind of nothing happening, and Kristen walks up to a couple of fans and he nutmegs them, right? And that video, I think, has like 3.5 million or 4 million views. It's one of the most successful branded pieces ever on Instagram. And it really naturally put the athlete front and center. It wasn't forced. It was very organic to both House of Highlights and Instagram platform, and to Kristen himself. And it was a way for Gatorade to get their message out kind of seamlessly. and to be able to get it out on the platform that really resonates with their target audience. So when a brand and a publisher and the athlete, can all kind of come together, it's a really, really exciting thing. I think the social platforms really allow that to take effect in a really unique way. That's just much more engaging.
Okay, so I want to respond to some of the critics of this trend for a second. And Doug, I'll put it back to you. So you're at the Thanksgiving table, and your uncle, he's a couple glass of whiskey in, and he starts laying into you about House of Highlights and how it's taking us too far away from the games themselves. What's happening in the bubble? What are we watching in the bubble? We're watching, the Mavs play pickleball on their day off. Like, this is silly stuff that has nothing to do with the games themselves, and it's not sustainable. It's a sideshow. And maybe it's fun for right now, but we're kind of losing what makes sports epic and official and big. So how do you respond to people like that that's saying this era of athlete power and this type of content is kind of fleeting?
Man, I feel like you were really at my Thanksgiving. I don't know how you knew that. Man, you even knew the uncle and everything. So a couple of things. Like, this is a critique that we see quite a bit, stick to highlights and things of that nature. But the reality of it is, the target audience for House of Highlights in particular is younger, right? It's 13 to 24. And the content that they gravitate towards is not only always the straight highlight. And for House of Highlights, what we've really tried to do is provide a narrative, right? It's not just like all of a sudden dropping you into this one game or this one moment. It's really about building the story arcs behind the players and really allowing people to be invested. I think a lot of reasons why you're seeing, the Heat or MLB struggle is because a lot of the people don't know the personalities behind it, right? Mike Trout is one of the most amazing baseball players of all time, but people don't really know who Mike Trout is. You don't get to see much of Mike Trout's personality. So then when the World Series is happening and the MLB is happening right now, honestly, most people don't even know whether or not he's in it, And I think what you want to be able to do is really provide a sense of depth about who these people are. And that really provides a rooting interest, and it really helps appeal to a younger audience, especially a Gen Z audience that drifts more towards personalities, that's watching less of the live sports. I think if anything, we're really, really enhancing that. So when we're able to show a different side of Tyler Hero, we're able to show a different side of LeBron, that goes out to 20 million House of Highlights followers, that reaches, a different set of audience and gets them more engaged. So yes, it's not always the traditional highlight that you may see, but it is putting the athletes themselves front and center and helping them appeal to a younger audience, making them more relevant and just always front of mind. Without that, if it's just the straight highlights, it becomes less interesting and you start to lose that audience. And I think it may not feel as epic or as traditional, but I think for a younger audience, this is how they consume content. And you have to, make sure that you're staying resonant with them.
It's great. Yeah. Your uncle's not convinced, but I was convinced by that. Yeah. Okay. So rounding it out, I wanted to look ahead to kind of beyond 2020. Obviously there's been such a spike of athlete-driven content, athlete-driven series this year as people have been at home and without a lot to do, but wanted to kind of look into the future, 2021 and beyond. Is this trend something that's going to endure in its current form? Or do you think it's a blip on the radar or more of like an acceleration of a broader pattern? So Caroline, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think this is definitely an acceleration of a longer term trend. And I think exactly sort of as you were talking about in that last question as well, I think that we kind of live in this world now where I don't think we can ever really expect athletes to sort of shut up and dribble. I think that they've really found a very powerful voice. And they're sort of, if we look at it from like the social justice standpoint, I think they're using it for good and really driving change. But I also think that they're actually doing a lot to kind of, bring about and increase awareness of the sports that they play. I think, for example, on YouTube, if I, might be a big fan of a certain creator, I might watch a collab that he or she did with Ryan Garcia. I'm like, this guy's really interesting. I'm now sort of subscribing to his channel. And now I realize he's a big upcoming fight. And now I'm sort of buying the pay-per-view to watch his fight. I think this sort of acceleration of athletes finding their voice, connecting with fans, being authentic, not only sort of helps drive tune-in awareness of their sport that they play, but I also think it sort of helps empower them be more than just an athlete. And especially as, social creation tools change, as phones get better and better and you can sort of shoot from your camera, I think that helps. And now you also have this sort of next generation of athletes that really sort of grew up on YouTube in a way that I think, our A-list athletes right now sort of didn't necessarily, just given sort of the timing. And I think as they really sort of see the inherent value of the platform, they're now sort of transitioning from, viewers to creators in their own right. And I think that this trend is only going to continue next year and beyond, regardless of sort of what ends up playing out with COVID and how these leagues change. I think athletes are just going to continue to create really great content, and they don't necessarily have to go through other platforms anymore. They can go direct to fan through YouTube and other platforms.
That's great. Will?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think what we're seeing here is an increase in interest in athlete content, but I don't think we're necessarily seeing it as with the loss of or a decrease in interest in other content, right? I don't think they are rising because leagues, media, and teams are following. I think what we're seeing is that social media distribution is replacing traditional media distribution, right? So if you look at how you would previously decide what team and what athlete you would root for, it would be, I grew up in Washington, D.C., I get the Washington Post, I watch the Washington sports channels, therefore, unfortunately, I'm a Washington Wizards fan, right? That was the traditional way to do it. But now you have a whole lot of other reasons to choose who you might want to be a fan of. Maybe I am going to be a Golden State Warriors fan because I love what Steph Curry's putting on his social, and I'm more attracted to that than this traditional media distribution I used to have. So I think with that, you're going to see all boats rise, because whether it's an athlete who is more attractive to a specific fan, regardless of geography, the same can be true with a team, right? Maybe it's the Toronto Raptors are particularly popular in the UK, which I have an experience of watching the finals last year in the UK, and they were incredibly popular there. So I think we're going to see all boats continue to rise, but I think athletes are definitely going to get a bigger and bigger part of that pie, because traditionally they haven't had their own distribution to own on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the genie's out of the bottle and it's not going back. I think it's only going to accelerate. I think Will's point is a really good one about, the athletes essentially driving the interest in the teams and the teams driving the interest in the leagues, right? That's definitely a trend that I think is here, and it's going to accelerate. And I think the athlete creator, like that merger, I think is really going to be heightened over the course of the next decade. I think if you look at, a soccer player like Serge Aguero, there are definitely people on Twitch that probably don't even know Serge Aguero from his soccer success. They just know him as, kind of this Twitch personality. And I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see, whether it's Ben Simmons joining FaZe or Bronny joining FaZe, you're going to see kind of this new world open up where athletes are not only going to be attached to traditional teams, but maybe things like creator teams. And the creator and athlete will kind of merge in a really interesting way that will probably redefine fandom over the course of the next 10 to 20 years.
All right. Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. And thank you, Caroline, Doug, and Will for joining us. And again, to the Clios and Bleacher Report for supporting us with the production. Very excited to see how this trend continues to play out. I know as Portal A, we're going to be following very closely and continuing to try to make content that attracts viewers. So I know you guys will be doing the same. Cool. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you.
All right, everyone.
Thanks for your
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Across the country, our communities are full of potential, and the AT&T Believes movement was created by employees to unleash it. Because we do more than just live and work in these communities. We believe in them.
As you all know, the impact of social media on sports culture really can't be understated. We've got athletes that are hustling on social, they're hustling on the sidelines, they're hustling within their communities as well. And today, Clio Sports would like to present the 2020 Clio Sports Impact Award, presented by AT&T, to one of basketball's best and to the 2019 WNBA MVP, Elena Delle Donne. Presenting that award today, Shiz Suzuki, the Assistant Vice President of Sponsorships and Experiential Marketing at AT&T.
Hi, my name is Shiz Suzuki, and I'm the AVP of Sponsorships and Experiential Marketing at AT&T. We are so excited to be partners with the Clio Sports Awards this year and to be presenting the 2020 Clio Sports Impact Award during the new Sports Marketing Playbook Virtual Summit. AT&T thrives on its purpose of creating connection with each other, with what people and businesses need to be productive every day, and with the stories and experiences that matter to all of us. We are committed to elevating women in sports, entertainment, business, and work to create real, actionable change in the global landscape for gender equality as part of our overall key value of Stand for Equality. This year has undoubtedly been one for the history books. But regardless of the hurdles it presented, AT&T's support of women and women in sports has not wavered. It was our honor to support the WNBA and its athletes as an inaugural WNBA changemaker during one of the most unique and powerful seasons of our lifetime. Today, I have the pleasure of honoring someone who has transcended the game to show the social and cultural impact that athletes and athletics have on people around the world. Someone who not only led the Washington Mystics to their first WNBA championship in franchise history, but also continues to raise awareness around Lyme disease, pay equity in women's sports, and people with special needs. Her partnership and touching ad spot with Nike have impacted the lives of countless underrepresented people with disabilities who have now been included in sports culture in a way that's never been seen before. We at AT&T, along with Clio Sports Awards, are pleased to announce the 2020 Clio Sport Impact Award recipient, Elena Delle Donne. Congratulations, Elena.
I'm humbled to receive this Clio Social Impact Award, especially in a year when so many athletes have stepped forward as leaders and role models in the fight for equality and social justice. I'd like to thank those who selected me for this honor and AT&T for sponsoring the award. I, of course, can't do what I do alone, so I want to acknowledge my team, my wife Amanda for her endless support and passionate personality, Ted Leontis and Monumental Sports for supporting me and always working to do the right thing, and everyone at Octagon who has lent themselves to these efforts. The Special Olympics, Lyme disease awareness, pay equality, LGBTQ rights, and protecting Black lives are important to me because there's some element of each of those issues in every single day of my life. Having a platform because I played basketball to share these causes with others is truly a gift. And finally, I know the namesake of these awards, Clio, is a goddess, a muse for the celebration of great deeds and accomplishments. So I also want to give a nod in this year, in this ongoing fight for equality, to a goddess, a divine female entity who, like most women I know, uses her energy to celebrate and lift up others.
Elena knows how I feel about her, so I will save myself the embarrassment and simply say, congratulations again, Elena. Now, Bleacher Report's on-air host for Highlight Her, Ari Chambers, another one of my favorites, sat down, virtually, of course, with Elena to chat about what's been happening over these last few months. So let's take a look at this Fireside Chat brought to you by AT&T and Octagon.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm Ari Chambers here with Elena Delle Donne, the Clio Sports 2020 Social Impact winner. Elena, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I think like the most important thing is like to just be honest about these times. Like there's days where it's tough and it just feels like things keep getting worse, but I have got great people in my life, and when you're honest with one another and vulnerable in these times, like it's just good to be honest, talk about things, show your feelings, and try to find ways to stay busy. So I've really been getting into some of my favorite hobbies, one being woodworking, and just kind of getting involved in those things has kept me going.
Just when I thought that you couldn't get any greater, I see your art and I'm like, what the heck, Elena? When did you start doing, I know that we're going a little off, but like, when did you start with your off the court things like that?
So I actually started the whole woodworking business in like 2016. My wife and I were doing some DIY projects, and people on Instagram were like super interested in what we were doing. So we set up the business and we kind of just like restarted it again this summer when I wasn't able to go to the bubble due to my illness. So it was a really good way to kind of spend my summer and figure out other ways to make money other than playing basketball. So it's been good.
You know, going beyond ball is one thing with artwork, but we've seen you use your platform for greater good. You've always been a mover and shaker in the world, and people respect things that you say. People respect how you carry yourself in life. How have you used your platform to advocate for women in sports in general?
I think the biggest thing I've tried to do is just be myself and celebrate being unique and being you. And when people are that, it makes our world such a better place. So that's number one. And then just trying to speak with companies and sponsors and trying to demand what they're doing for men's sports, do it with women's sports, to add to the visibility, to create merchandise for fans to be able to purchase, to see us daily, you know, not just in the WNBA season, all through the year. You should be able to buy our things and support us. So I think we've seen a huge increase in viewership because we're on TV. So, fair. I mean, it's things we've been saying for so many years, and it's exciting to see these things happen. And it's like, yep, that's supporting what we've been saying for years and years.
2020 has set you guys up to be in that upward trajectory and increased passion throughout all the masses. But where do you think the WNBA will be in the upcoming years? Where can it be? Where should it be? What direction do you see it going?
I mean, it's the greatest sports league, and we have the most incredible fans. And I say this all the time. We have the most dedicated fans because it's not easy to find our gear, to watch our games. Like, you have got to search it out, and you've got to have every league pass and whatnot to be able to watch us play. So I think the more and more people see us and the more visible we are, and you can see these incredible women of our league who are mothers, who are lawyers, who are doing so many things and who are just so inspiring, that people are going to catch on and be behind this league. And it's already started. 2020, as weird and crazy of a year it's been phenomenal for the WNBA because we've gotten TV time, and you can see the support has just grown and grown.
Let me tell you, there have been many days where I have searched and searched and searched for you guys' game. But you know what? We found it. We are dedicated to you guys.
Dedicated.
How do you think brands and other media companies can better support you guys? So we know that it's now increased network exposure, but how can brands and media companies come together and support the women of the W?
Yeah, I think you see what they're doing on the men's side of things, and demanding that for women and women's sports. And it's amazing. There's a story of a young girl, Adi, who went to a store right after the Mystics won the championship, and she asked for my shoes and she asked for a Mystics jersey, and it was rough. An employer was not great with how he responded to her, and she wrote a story, it picked up, and brands are paying attention. So I am excited for our young generation to continue to step up and change this. And we as WNBA players have been fighting for so long that we'll continue to step up to demand better from the brands. When you go into a store, you should see both women and men across all sports, and it should be equal. So that is something we'll fight for, and I'm excited that our young generation is ready to step up and do the same.
I love that little girls are running around saying, I want to be like Elena Delle Donne. And little boys too. I've heard of several grown men say, I'm trying to play like Elena. So I think it's transcendent beyond just, the little girls, just the children. It's a game that's growing rapidly, and you truly love to see it. What's the biggest change that you've seen in the past few years, other than just 2020, with the WNBA?
I think the biggest change has been more viewership, number one, like just seeing our games on TV, but also seeing the NBA guys really step up and show their support for us, because they've been supporting us forever. And I think they've seen like, hey, we've got to talk about this publicly and make this known that they are phenomenal women. We study their game and we learn from them, to get rid of all the naysayers who probably maybe suited up in high school and never played since and love to talk trash to women ballers for some reason. So I think that's kind of changed that narrative at least a little bit. But yeah, we just got to continue to do what we do, play the best basketball possible. And our young generation is phenomenal. Each year, I feel like the rookies come in and just stir things up and make our league that much stronger. So continue to put out the best product possible is number one.
You mentioned phenomenal woman, and I think that you are absolutely all-encompassing of a phenomenal woman. You've lived such a selfless life. Everything you touch, you seem to make better. So it's just like, it gives me chills, because I'm just like, wow, Elena, I don't know how you really improve every space that you enter. But when you refer to your little sister, or when you refer to your sister, Lizzie, you say she makes you better. Talk to me about your sister and the journey that you've had with her.
Yeah, so my sister was born with special needs. She's deaf, she's blind, and has a lot of other disabilities. So I've been able to grow up with what I feel like is an angel in my family. And because she can't speak and she can't hear, I've been able to have a relationship with her that is so much more than words. It's being in person with her. It's feeling love in other ways than just saying, I love you. It's your actions. And it's something that has just inspired me daily to be better. And then not only that, but her perseverance has been so incredible. So anything that I face in life on the basketball court has never compared to what Lizzie has to go through every single day just to get out of bed and to wake up and to have her beautiful smile with her contagious laugh. Like, if she can do that in a day, I know that I can wake up and be great with whatever that has been thrown my way.
I know this might be ignorant to ask, but what are some ways you communicate your love to Lizzie?
Yeah. Oh no, it's not ignorant at all to ask. It's a super interesting relationship that can be hard to even understand without seeing it. But the way we communicate is through touch, smell, hugs, especially kisses. She gives big kisses, and her giggles are the greatest thing ever. And unfortunately, through these COVID times, it's been awful that I've had to really stay away, and we're just trying to all stay safe. But I get updates daily. I get videos of the big giggles that continues to make me smile and to push on. So it's amazing that my interactions with her, without her ever saying a word to me in my life, she's by far been the person who has taught me the most.
Absolutely. What would you say to anyone out there that has a family member with special needs? Like, what is some advice that you can give to them?
Well, I think first of all, they get it because they've been through it. They understand. And the biggest thing is just supporting that individual and being there for them. And I think it's why it's made me love team sports, because I grew up on a team. And I always say, Lizzie's our superstar. We got to make sure she's ready to go, whatever she needs, make her ready and help her be great for the day. So it can be stressful, especially when I was young. I was always afraid because she just seemed ill, and her trips to the hospital would always scare me, and I'd just be so afraid. But as I've gotten older, I understand that she needs a lot of support in the medical world, especially, and you learn that as best way as you can support her, you do that. But it can be super tough, and you need a huge team to support it.
You have a huge team, and you also have a huge platform, and you partnered with Nike with an adaptable shoe. Can you talk to me a little bit about your partnership with Nike regarding that?
Yes. So ever since I was younger, I've been like a shoe guru. I love sneakers. I always wanted like the newest Cheryl Swoops or Michael Jordan shoe. And then my brother and I would always be getting these like really cool shoes, like for Christmas. That would be the one thing we would really want to open up. And then Lizzie was always in these like clunky, big black boots. We call them the Air Lizzes. But I remember just asking my mom, why can't Liz wear cool shoes? Like, she should be wearing what we're wearing. And she explained to me, it is so hard to get a shoe on her foot, number one, and then a shoe that can properly support her. So when I went into this endeavor with Nike, my biggest thing was always a shoe for all. So a shoe for boys, girls, if you have special needs, if you don't, whatever that may be, this shoe should work for every single person. Get rid of, the stereotypes, like this is Elena's shoe, it should be for little girls and that's all. No, it should be available for everyone. So it was a long process of making a shoe that I could wear on court and play in the WNBA finals at the highest level in, that's also going to work for Lizzie's foot and be easy to get on, easy to get off, and support her ankle properly. So it was about a 2.5-year process, but I am so thrilled with how it ended up turning out. And it's my favorite basketball shoe to wear, and it's definitely Lizzie's favorite shoe to wear too. So it worked.
I just love how you're diving into this equality and all across the board. I think it's very admirable. But let's dive into some of your personal life. The Players Tribune article came out, and I don't think that anybody understood what you went through every single day. Just to see the picture of you holding the pills, I was like, God, I struggle with like 2 little pills when I'm feeling sick, but I can't imagine. How has your life changed since you've been diagnosed with Lyme disease?
It's changed greatly. I feel like I am so much more aware of my body, number one, because I have got to be on top of how I'm feeling and try to be ahead of a relapse, God forbid. And that's something that I've experienced many times since being diagnosed in 2008. And just having an appreciation for health. Like before it, I was fine. I rarely ever had to take medicine. It would be like I had a little cold or something. And to wake up every day and just know like I've got to support my body and treat it the best way possible. But also be grateful for a day where I feel good, or grateful for being able to compete on the basketball court, because having an illness like this, it can be stripped away from me at any moment. So I just know the importance of enjoying each day.
I know a lot of people aren't really well versed, even in the medical field, about Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about the process of diagnosis, and like, was it a relief when you finally found out, like, oh God, this is what it is? Like, just talk me through how that came about.
We are so behind in research, in doctors being aware of what's going on. So it was a real struggle when I first was sick and just couldn't get answers, and was also getting wrong diagnosis. So that was really hard for me, because I knew, like, I am so sick and this is not in my head. I'm not making this up. So to have doctors who just weren't Lyme literate giving me a diagnosis because that's what they decided to do, instead of just saying, I don't know what's wrong with you, go to another doctor, was super disheartening. So as bad as it is to get diagnosed, it's like, thank goodness, at least I know what it is and I can battle it now, instead of being told I'm making this up in my head. So my hope for Lyme disease is that we get so much more awareness and we acknowledge that this is a real illness and so many people are struggling. And unfortunately, so many of the treatments aren't covered by insurance. So that's one of the biggest things that my foundation is trying to do, is just continue to push the envelope and to find ways where insurance is going to cover this, because there are sick people out there and kids, and we can't keep going on this way.
What made you mentioned your foundation. What made you start the Elena Delle Donne Foundation?
I started it because I want to help people. And fortunately, my wife is a phenomenal businesswoman and was able to help me set everything up. And she's the one who's behind all my fundraisers and does such an amazing job. But money talks. And in this foundation, I knew I needed to raise money for research, for awareness, for the Special Olympics, for all the things that we care so much about. We wanted to be able to not only have a foundation where we get to talk to people about what is going on and what we're trying to do, but also to raise money and get that money into places that's going to make change.
What's the whole mission of the foundation?
I mean, the mission is definitely to support people with special needs and to support the Lyme disease community. And, each year it's kind of different what we get into and where we decide to, give money. But this year, especially with everything I've been facing with Lyme, we've been doing a lot in that community. There's going to be a phenomenal movie coming out that I'm not sure if I'm able to leak that, but there's a lot coming. There's a lot coming. And the biggest thing is to shift the way people think of Lyme and to explain how awful this disease can be.
Mm-hmm. What do you wish people knew about Lyme disease?
That it's very real, that it's not something that you just get a tick bite and take doxycycline for 30 days and it can be gone. I mean, yes, for some people it happens, but this is a disease that attacks people in so many different ways. And it's a disease that sometimes seems invisible. So for me, I could be on the basketball court, I'm competing, I look healthy. So it's hard for people to understand that I'm sick and I'm battling something. So for people to know that everybody is going through something and to not always judge the book by its cover and to listen.
Mm-hmm. Knowing that you go through that, what are some ways that you take care of yourself outside of the 64 pills a day? What are some ways that Elena Delle Donne says, I'm going to care for me?
Yes. Sleep is huge. That is, I have got to get at least 8 hours. I'm usually up 9 to 10. If I am not getting the correct amount of sleep, I just am not feeling great. So sleep is huge. Get rid of the TV, the phone in bed, like go to bed and really get some good sleep. And meditation has been huge for me. I do it just 10 minutes a day, not that long, but I give myself that 10 minutes a day to focus on my breathing and nothing else, to really just kind of center myself and to realize to be in this moment. And stress can be something that makes Lyme or makes anything go crazy and make you feel pretty awful. So that's been able to kind of help me decompress and do my best to not let stress take over.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of being in the moment, you had a great moment in 2019. You're a champion. And I just want to know, where does that rank in looking back on your career, like your rank of what you're most proud of?
Yeah, that's definitely number one. That's been a goal my entire life, to not only get to the WNBA, but to be at the top and to win that championship with DC and with my teammates who are family and who I absolutely love. Was just such an incredible experience. And even the founding fans that were there and just bawling, like they did it too. They had been through so much. So to share in that moment together was so special and makes me want to do it again.
I mean, the ceiling is not low, right? You have endless potential. So what do you still want to accomplish? I mean, another ship, like what's going on?
Certainly more WNBA championships, hopefully some more gold medals with the Olympic team, and doing more with brands to push the envelope and to get women's sports equal to the men's side of things. So there's a lot of work to be done. I have always said I want to leave this game better than when I came in. And I'm hoping to do that because for some reason, when you have a basketball and you put it into a hoop and you can do that pretty well, people want to listen to you. So I try to do the most with that platform and just try to make it better for others.
As you're getting these championships and gold medals, how do you define being a champion?
We say it all the time. It's gold standard in everything you do, in your relationships and how you treat people and how you communicate with your teammates and how you show up to the gym every single day. It's all those little things and how much you want to lock into those moments and be great in those moments. So gold standard, that's what we're about in DC.
I know that you don't like to talk about yourself like that, but I'm going to put you on the spot and go off the record. Well, on the record. Your award is representative of a goddess. Mm-hmm. What makes Elena Delle Donne a goddess? And I want you to claim that. I want you to own that and tell us why you're a goddess.
Being a powerful female. I feel like women have been through so much and we continue to fight. We are so multifaceted because we have to be. That's just the way the world has made us and expects us to be, but just being a badass female.
Period. Well, thank you so much. You are a badass female. You're a champion, you're a goddess, and I really appreciate you. The world appreciates you, and congratulations again on your award.
Thank you so much.
That you are, both of you are. And I don't know that there's any better way to follow up that conversation than with the Women in Sports panel presented by AT&T. We've got some top executives from both brands and leagues, as well as an iconic sports figure, also chatting with Ari about the role that brands and media have in fighting for pay equity in women's sports. Here it is.
What's going on, guys? I'm Ari Chambers, and I am the voice of Highlight Her, Bleacher Report's women's platform. And I'm here to take you through the Women in Sports panel, sponsored by AT&T. I'm really excited for today. We have some powerhouses that I personally look up to, and I know a lot of you guys do too. First up, we have Shiz Suzuki, who's the Assistant Vice President of Sponsorships and Experiential Marketing at AT&T. She just pushes the envelope of innovation. She and her team bring fans closer to their passion for sports, entertainment, and communities through on-site activations and social digital engagements that elevate moments for fans with leagues like the NBA, the WNBA, my personal favorite, and NBA 2K leagues, US Soccer, and the NCAA. And then she handles events, teams, players like Alex Morgan and LeBron James, and venues and other programs. But a fun fact, Sis loves to travel and has gone to 35 countries. She's hitchhiked in Nicaragua, slept in airports in Chile and Argentina. I have no idea how she did this, but got stuck in a mud bath in Colombia. We'll have to talk about that later because she's, I don't know, but rode on an ATV in Easter Island, swam with sharks in the Maldives. And the best part of traveling, out of all that, she loves the food. Relatable, heavily relatable, but she loves to experience culture and everything like that. Thank you for joining us, Shiz.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Next, we have somebody who's near and dear to me, especially because the WNBA is heavy in my heart. We have Kia Clark. I mean, just the ideal woman. She's entering her first season as the Chief Executive Officer of the New York Liberty, where she'll lead and manage all business aspects of the Liberty organization, including strategic planning, revenue, P&L, and operations. Additionally, Clark works with stakeholders on key elements of team business, including the growing fan base, maximizing sales and fan engagement, and improving business performance. She's actually the first CEO of the New York Liberty. And, all these changes that are happening with the Libs, I just can't wait to see her lead even more. She's not new to it. She's not new at all to it, but just rising to that tippy top, and salute to you. But a fun fact, she's an aspiring DJ. I've nicknamed her DJ KC on the ones and twos, but she's purchased equipment about 1.5 years ago. And in her spare time, she spends. So watch out. As she's the CEO, she might, hold it down with the music in Barclays next year.
You never know. Hey,
look, I just want to see you spin. That's what I'm like. I'm like really dubbing you that. You're gonna own that. It's just, I can't wait. Next up, we have Michael Robichaud. He joined MasterCard in 2008 and is currently the SVP of Global Sponsorships. And he's full of knowledge, and I can't wait to hear all of his perspectives. But he's responsible for the development and execution of MasterCard's overall sponsorship strategy. Some of MasterCard's main sports platforms include the Major League Baseball, the PGA Tour, Australian Open Tennis, the Rugby World Cups, and the UEFA Champions League. During his tenure, Michael has led an expansion of the portfolio into entertainment partnerships such as the Grammy Awards and have included relationships with Beyonce, Queen Bee herself, Justin Timberlake, Camila Cabello, and the Jonas Brothers. MasterCard has also created the first of its kind partnership with Riot Games and League of Legends. And fun fact, which I don't even know how you ended up here, but when he graduated from college, he was an environmental engineer and spent 5 years cleaning out underground gas station leaks and hazardous waste areas at military bases. I mean, I after this panel, I have to know, like, what was that like? That just sounds so risky. I have no idea. And of course, we can't have a women's sports panel without the legend herself, Brandi Chastain. She's an iconic U.S. sporting figure and a Hall of Famer. Her and her U.S. soccer teammates brought soccer to the masses during the 1999 Women's World Cup Finals, which we've all seen the picture of her, but let's walk it through. She scored a goal on a penalty kick after the second overtime of the U.S. versus China match and struck her famous pose that went something like this. And it was great. I have it on the shirt. I mean, who doesn't have a poster of it? But she was photographed on her knees, mouth wide open, eyes closed, fist in the air, wearing a black sports bra and white soccer shorts. Heavy on the detail of that. Love that. Her celebration pose was featured in magazines and newspapers around the world. But after that, she became a household name. But beyond soccer, she's a devoted wife, mom, coach, author, and philanthropist. And I actually learned that she's a great chef because she is a chop champ, chopped on the Food Network. And I told her before, and I can't even boil water. So kudos to you, Brandi. Can't wait to hear more about your story. Welcome, everyone. I mean, what an extensive resume. All of you guys contribute to women in sports in a very different way. So I just want to start with our first topic, women in sports. So I'll let Shiz lead this one, but all are welcome to join in. How do we convince people to care about women's sports, and whose responsibility is it to grow the game?
Yeah, this is a great question to start off on. I actually think it's less about convincing people, and it's really more about showing them. And I mean, we are in the presence of greatness here with Brandi Chastain. And so don't have to say much here in regards to the fact that the U.S. has world-class female athletes, right? Our women's U.S. soccer team have won 4 out of 8 World Cup tournaments that they've participated in, 4 gold medals out of 6 Olympic Games. And then even on the USA women's basketball side, that team has actually only lost 1 time since 1996 in over 110 international competitions. That is an incredible number. So this is really about giving women's sports the proper spotlight to showcase their talent. And when we think about caring, this is about giving the fans the ability to tune in, to watch, to buy the merch, to cheer on, and to grow the visibility of women in sports. But some of the statistics that we have right now are quite staggering. We know that women's sports receives only about 3% of media coverage. And from a sponsorships perspective, it's less than 1% of the investment dollars. So there's a lot there in terms of what we need to do better. I know a lot of people talk about and ask about, well, what is that silver bullet? What do we need to do to fix this? There is no silver bullet. This is a very complex value chain when we think about what goes into sports marketing. And frankly, these are, if you look at the pieces that grow into the value chain, this is really there's a flywheel effect here. So, whether it be broadcasters in terms of increasing the amount of women's sports coverage, whether that be in terms of highlights or the actual games themselves, whether it be the advertisers to purchase more advertising and spending more in media there, whether that be with sponsors investing in to help elevate women in sports, et cetera. There's a full value chain effect here. Everybody has to do their part. Every bit helps, frankly. And what we need to do, and I believe we've started this momentum of getting this flywheel unstuck and moving in the right direction. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we've got the right talent. We've just got to get them out. We just have to get more of it out there. And we need to make sure that we've got women athletes and women in general accurately being portrayed. And frankly, so that way that we have better role models, right? That way we can grow the number of role models for the next generation of women and girls. So got a challenge ahead of us.
100%. And then you mentioned the U.S. has been very, very dominant. Brandy, can you speak to that experience as an athlete?
Well, you know what? I think one of our great gifts here in the U.S. is that we have opportunity, right? So in 1972, when Title IX was enacted, it spoke about opportunity to participate in educational environments. And so that, I think, allowed me, because I was born in the late 60s, to really have a platform. And I also happened to grow up in Northern California, which I could be outside all day playing. So I was very much encouraged to participate. So it is frustrating to me, Shiz, and I love all that you said. I think it's really great. And I do believe that everybody is responsible for the outcome. It's not just, is it advertisers? Is it broadcasters? Is it the athletes? It's everyone. So, you know, I feel that the talent is there. And I just watched Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe doing the Snow Angels and the confetti. And, you know, I'm thinking, these are incredible athletes and incredible people. You know, they're not mutually exclusive. These are educated, you know, they have college degrees. They are incredibly athletic and talented. And we just need to spotlight these women much, much more. And I think we all are responsible. And I love that you said that, because it's absolutely true. No one can be quiet. Everybody has to partake. You know, yes, the women's national team has been leading a charge that unintentionally so from the beginning. But I think once we saw that big crowd in 1999, we realized that there are people who care. There are people who really care, and there are people who want to show up. And so we need those platforms. We need the WNBA. We need the NWSL. We need those things. And as you said, Shiz, I think it's because we need to see these positive role models and mentors for our young girls. They come from every community across our country. It's not just specific pockets. So we want them all to believe that this is possible for them. And we want them to be the CEOs of the WNBA teams, right? Not just the players. So I think that is also a part of the message.
So much of the conversation around equal representation and compensation in women's sports goes back to ratings, revenue, and rights. But I do absolutely agree with you. I think representation is just so important, and just getting involved and investing is so important. But how do you think we got here, and why do you think it's been such a challenge for women athletes and leagues to break through with the media companies and fans and brands in particular, especially for players who are willing or who are winning championships and performing at the highest level? You know, you have these marketable players, you have the Sue Birds and the Megan Rapinoes of the world, but there's still that barrier. So Kia, I'll let you take this. Like, what do you think is causing that friction, that resistance?
Yeah, you know, and I have to start by saying I completely agree with everything Shiz and Brandy said, and I'm vote number 3, that it's everyone's responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I really do think that breakthrough will come when we're normalizing sport amongst people. And I look at it through the lens of, I have 2 young children. It's the point where my son is looking at my daughter and saying, you can play just like I can play, and you have the same opportunities that I have. And a very personal story, when I was growing up and playing basketball, you know, it was like, she's good for a girl. And just 10 or 12 years after that, I had a younger cousin who dropped 55 points in a boys club game. And all my younger boy cousins started to say, she's just flat out good. Yeah. And I think it's that trajectory, it's that change. And while we all agree that it's everyone's responsibility, I really do think that it's going to start with that erasure of there being a difference, and really normalizing what people come to sport for. It's people want to align with greatness, with winning, with eliteness, with you are better than anybody in the world who does this. And when we are viewing the women through that same lens, because they're producing. When we're all doing that, we're going to be better for it. But I do really, believe that that's going to be, that's the last piece to really knock it down. It's across all sides. How are we really just viewing this in terms of total equality?
Mm-hmm.
Let me just give you an example I experienced today. I'm out entertaining potential clients, and I'm on the golf course. First, it's a woman bringing two males to play golf, right? But that right there is, we've broken a stereotype. So I feel like we've overcome a hurdle. Now, the second part is we're out on the course and I hit a drive, and it's a pretty good one, I'll admit. And then one of the potential clients hits his ball and he's like, oh, that's going to be so close. I think I got you on that. And we get to the ball and my ball is farther. And he's like, oh my gosh, like I'm so upset, or I'm so mad. I said, wait. I said, you're saying that like you don't expect me to be able to outdrive you. He goes, oh yeah, you're a professional athlete. Okay, I'm fine with that. Like, so I still think it's like this underlying, it's not like, sometimes it's not overt. I think it's just the way we've done things, right? It's the way the culture's been, and the culture is changing. And again, I think that's why going back to everybody is responsible, because we are responsible for the culture that we decide we want. And so I feel by me saying, hey, hold on, you should expect me to hit that ball there. Mm-hmm. I have a chance to change that perspective. And so I think that's very important. If you have an opportunity, even in a one-on-one, you have to take it. And when you do, I think that then starts undoing this sticky situation that you're talking about, Shiz.
100%. And Michael, you're our lone man on the panel, holding it down. How have you seen it grow? And what do you think, like from a male perspective, can help push the game forward?
Well, thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. And I think one of the things I've learned over the last few years that this has become such a big part of my life is that everyone does have a role, and it's not something for, a guy to sit on the sidelines, right? We have whatever my job is, and I need to be thoughtful about it. And, one of the things I'm always thinking of is we can't talk about this enough. This is really a part of the problem, and it's amazing having Brandy here. I hope I get this right, but I was told that actually the 99 team was wearing men's clothes because there was not enough female clothes that were done back in the time. There's still male shoes that women are wearing. I mean, I've talked to Annika Sorenstam, who's one of our ambassadors. She was wearing men's golf shirts. And I just sit there and go, how in my lifetime has this happened that we're still here? So it cuts across so many different layers and levels of that's just how it was, right? You just said it. And so I think for all of us, we have to look at it from every angle we have, whether you're running a team, part of a sponsor, or from the athlete. And I think talking about it so that no one assumes, well, of course it's like that, right? We have to have the conversation, but Shiz, you started out perfectly. My notes here say availability of the product. Half the planet is women. So theoretically, half the planet should be interested, but even we know it's way more than that. But if we can't watch it, if I can't turn the TV on, if I can't find it, how am I supposed to even know I like it or don't like it? So I think availability and then making the stories. And we all love a good story, and we've already started talking about some of the characters. And, I think of the Williams sisters and other people, and Lindsey Vonn. Just think of any of these athletes that have captivated us, that are the lead story that day. And no one says, okay, let's go to the women's sports news. It's just, this is the story right now. It's an amazing story we all have to watch, and we all do. So I think it's there. We just have to figure out how to finish connecting those dots and make it much more of just a normal consciousness.
Absolutely. And again, going back to that representation, just having the women on the forefront. But consequently, in 2020, we still have occurrences where the first woman is happening. What barriers of entry still exist for women in the sports space? I know we're talking about marketing, but like why are women not entering the space, and how do we overcome that? Shiz, I'll let you lead on this one.
Yeah, and Michael, I really love what you said, because you're absolutely right. Allyship, being men being the other half of the population, we absolutely need that in order for us to be able to change these cultural differences. And Brandy, your story so resonates with me. I have a team of men on my team. And when I first took this role about 3 years ago, I'll never forget one of my first experiences where they're taking me around and introducing me to leaders in the business. And, you know, I oversee all sponsorships at the company at AT&T. And I'll never forget that most people thought that I reported to one of the, you know, the folks on my team, as opposed to making an assumption that I could possibly be the boss. And so the guys on my team were very thoughtful, and they started to introduce me as, this is Shiz and she's my boss. And I couldn't help but to go back to my hotel room and think to myself, gosh, there has to be a world where, and I've got a 4-year-old niece who I just adore and I love, and I just hope that one day when she's in the workforce, right, that we can make enough progress where somebody doesn't have to introduce her as being the boss, that people would automatically assume that there is a world where an Asian female could be a boss. But I think we all have a responsibility. I know I feel a very personal responsibility, whether that be in the role that I have or in coming here to talk to everybody today, and sharing this message. But you're right. I think that there's this area of, call it, there are plenty of qualified women. So if we think about it, maybe not necessarily on the court or on the course, but even, in the industry itself of sports marketing, on the business side of things, running teams, whether it be in decision-making roles, coaching roles, etc. There's a lot of qualified people in this industry. We simply need to hire them. We need to give them the opportunity. And, for us as a company, I know we're very much so focused on diversity of thought, diversity of the people behind that thought. So it's not just about inviting, people of color or women to the table. It is truly about hearing them and listening to them. And that participation inherently, frankly, builds better products and services, right? So for us as AT&T, and all of this makes business sense. 80% of household consumer decisions are made by women. So we absolutely should be connecting with them in that very authentic manner. We oftentimes see, especially in sports, something I call pink it and shrink it. This is my theory, is that this happens when you don't necessarily have the right mix of women at the table helping you to make decisions around your products and services, which is take something that you offer a male, maybe it's a jersey or other. And Michael and Brandy talked about this just a little bit earlier about attire and wear, and then just shrink it 3 sizes and turn it into the color pink and offer that to the ladies, right? And if they had enough women on the team in order to be able to help inform the fact that maybe not all women want the color pink, they would start to understand, or offering a whole different set of products and services. There's a greater opportunity there, frankly, for companies, brands, teams, leagues to be able to grow that fan base of, call it, women in a really authentic way. For me at AT&T, I'm really fortunate that this is a progressive enough company that they gave a woman of color a chance at a sponsorship role, who frankly had no sponsorships experience before, and that is me. I didn't come from a sports background. I didn't have a sponsorships background. This is one of the largest portfolios in the business, but what the company wanted was change. They wanted a diverse point of view. They wanted a new way of looking at things. And sure enough, in less than 3 years, we've been able to completely transform the portfolio mix. And we've been able to get into places like esports and gaming and really make a push there, in partnerships with the NBA and the WNBA, and of course, a lot of the great things that we're doing there. So, it's really about putting the right people in the right places. Sometimes it's about taking a chance, right? Somebody took a chance on me for that. And that's a really important thing to remember. I know for me, I will always hold that near and dear to my heart. I think about that when I make my hiring decisions. I've promoted women now. I've hired women of color into my team. And I firmly believe that has helped us in terms of connecting with our customer bases in a much more authentic way. And
you mentioned that somebody took a chance on you, and I see, Kia, you're in the highest position. I want to know a little bit about your journey, how you got there, and how you are emboldened and empowered to be such a force at the.
Sure. Yeah. My journey was really happenstance, to be completely honest. I knew I wanted a career in marketing. I wasn't even certain I wanted to work in sport. But when I discovered really it was the consumer behavior. When we started off on your first question, why people care about certain things, why people buy certain things, what really invokes you to open up your wallet and say, this is the thing I'm supporting. Once I put those two nuggets together, and my career actually started on the golf side, Golf Digest, Golf for Women.
You should cover Brandy over there on the golf course.
Yeah.
That was really the
Not today. Not today.
Not today. You did have that one long drive though. You know, that was the light switch though for me. And, you know, I clearly had a love for the game of basketball. I had played since I was 8 years old. And really, it was just a complete educational process. And, you know, I had gone to a 4-year school. I had finished my master's degree, but it was really those first years on my positions at the NBA, WNBA, at Golf Digest, at the Basketball Hall of Fame, where I was just learning so much and I couldn't get enough of it. I was falling in love with the fact that, you know, could I really be in a position to market women's sports? And in this case, it wound up, and I'm so fortunate and privileged that it became women's basketball. So, you know, I think absolutely many people took chances on me. And I'll add that intersection as Shiz has, where it's, you know, a woman working in a women's league is not out of the ordinary. We're in no shortage of diversity in terms of gender in our league. But being a Black woman, I've often been a first in many of the instances in my own family and professionally. And I don't shy away from that because I look at it as it means that I'm the last first and there's someone behind me and someone aspiring to. And if they can actually see it, they can actually be it. I had many, many role models along the way. Most of them were women, not so many women of color. So I'm happy to, you know, offer myself as that example of someone, you know, through hard work, through networking, through really just staying committed and passionate about, you know, what really resonated with me. You know, it's continuing to pay off. But, you know, again, I don't want to reiterate everything. Shiz dropped so many nuggets. Like I'm taking so many notes here on this panel today, but, you know, diversity of thought is important, but diversity in leadership is empowering. It means that you can, you know, turn around and bring somebody else into the fold. And interestingly enough, I was having a conversation with someone about an open position that they had and an open position that I had. And it was a gentleman who said, well, I can't really say this, but I absolutely want to hire a woman for the role. And I just think, you know, again, it goes back to this is the way we've always done things. Everyone, you know, it's a HR taboo thing to say, I'm deliberately hiring a woman for this role. Like, I understand that that's not the way that we're supposed to do things, but it's like, why not? If you really want to achieve ultimate diversity, if you really are being intentional about the way that you want to build your teams, then, you know, maybe it's that we have to flip this thing on its head and start to think about things a little bit differently.
Going more with the empowerment, I'm going a little off script here, but like Brandy stepping into the role of being that champion, being that mainstream figure as a champion, but being a woman, maybe before it was cool for women to be so exposed in the sports space. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about 1999 and the whirlwind that was?
Well, I will, but I again, I think what Kia and Shiz are saying is so valuable because, and I too am taking notes, I think it's valuable because what we want to teach and impart on our young women, and I'm going to go even farther than that, I'm going to say young girls, is that there should be no second guessing their own skills, right? Their own talent, their own desires. And what we want to do is deliver opportunity for them to build their life skills. And that's why I feel sports is so important. And me reaching this 1999 platform was because somebody just said, yes, you can. And I then grew up with a mantra from my mom, find your yes. And that yes was whatever I wanted to try, I could. And was it going to always work in my my direction? No, it wasn't. And probably better when it didn't, because then I learned more and I gained a better perspective. And so, you know, I really honestly think, and I'm just writing these things down, you know, this diversity of leadership and participation is, we have to honestly teach young girls. And I started a nonprofit in 2005 when shortly after the first WUSA league folded. And we have been working with 2nd through 5th grade girls about who they are and who they can be, and giving them positive collegiate female student athletes as role model mentors, so that they can see women that look like themselves, and they can say, well, they went to college and they grew up in a neighborhood like myself, and wow, I never thought that was possible. So to get them to be thinking about that they don't have to be perfect to, like Shiz said, you maybe weren't the quintessential perfect candidate for the position that you have, but you were confident enough to believe that you would figure it out. And so I think most women don't step up to those roles because in the past, and this is what I think culturally where we've been, is I'm not going to go for that thing until I believe I can do it 100%. Because if I don't get it right, then I won't have another woman might not have that opportunity. And so I think sports is a great proving ground for your own self and building ground for your own self-confidence. In 1999, I think the segue is that it allowed a population to view something in a way they hadn't seen it before, in a venue they hadn't seen filled with fans before. And the outcome was not really about power and strength and guts. It was about intellect, and it was about determination, and it was about game planning, and it was about follow through, and it was about bending but not breaking, and it was about humility and a respect, to the game and to the opponent. I mean, that was a match for the ages, because those two teams were as evenly matched as you'll ever see. And it came down to what, most of us would say is not the most fortunate way to end a game. But, if anybody asks me, is PK's the best way? I'll say, well, sure it is, because we came out on the good side. But, again, it was the faces in the stands. There was men, there was women. And I can't tell you, I'm here in the South. Well, no, I'm on the North Shore of Chicago right now at a golf course. And I can't tell you how many people come up and say, that was a great game. Like, it wasn't in their culture to watch soccer, but it captivated them in a way that they hadn't been captivated before. So not only are we trying to build people, we're trying to, like Michael said, about the stories that go along with them, and the emotions that we get when we watch sports, and that, what we can share with each other when we experience something like that. And so, as a woman who has been a professional athlete, now I am actually doing Shiz kind of what you started out doing at AT&T, which is I'm working for a company by the name of City Cheers. I have no former experience in the tech sector, and a boss came to me, and the CEO and founder, Winston Jabe, came to me and said, I have a job for you. You're the perfect person. And I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about, because I'm a former athlete and a soccer coach and mentor. He says, but you know how to run teams. You know people, you understand what inspires them and moves them, and you're competitive and you're relentless. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like me. And he's like, you'll do a good job. So again, we need those allies, as you said, but we also have to have the belief that we can do it. And so I'm lucky I had a mom that said, find your yes, don't take no for an answer. It's out there. You can do it. You just be yourself. And if you fall down, get right up.
I want to grab a notebook and a pencil right now and say, find your yes. Okay.
Yes.
Look, thank you, mama. Thank you, mama.
Yes, exactly.
But we often discuss networking, and there's a strategy behind collaborating. You guys had instances where people took that leap of faith on you guys, and you believed in yourself. But Michael, let's throw this to you. How do you decide to foster relationships so they can grow to be great partnerships? And what do you look for with collaborations? And does your strategy change at all between men and women?
For sure, the strategy's changed, because I think you're trying to do some different things, right? We're trying to specifically be a partner to grow, and I would say every partnership is slightly overused word, but it's also the right word, right? You're not just doing a transactional sort of sponsor, what have you. You really want to be a partner and understand shared values. That's probably the biggest thing people are talking about these days as well. What values do you have as a company, a business, a person? Who do you want who do you want to do things with? Because it's easy in the, the first meeting or two, you have a sales meeting or you have a, get to know each other and you're like, okay, this seems about right. But really when you think of the day-to-day and the decisions that are going to get made along the way, where are you trying to go? And I'm going to add a little bit of international to this because with MasterCard and everything we're doing, a lot of the things we're doing with women is outside of the U.S. And if I use my Americanism say soccer, but I use the word football sometimes, but we sponsor a lot of, we sponsor a lot of folks out there. And one of our favorite examples, we sponsor the women at Olympic Lyon. And you could read in the New York Times, there's different points of view, but some would say it's the best sports team in the world. Not best boys, not best girls, the best sports team in the world. The difference between them and everybody else in their sport is just phenomenal. And I tell you that because the owner of the club, who owns both the men's and the women's club, which is common in Europe, it's at his personal level that he looks at the empowerment and development of women. His board is 75, his board of his business, forget about sports, the board of his business, how he made his money, is 75% women. That's just who he is. It's just like, this is how he wants to run his business. I don't know every detail of why each person was chosen. And I'm sure along the way, it's because they're all great and they all fit somehow something he's trying to do and something and he doesn't really even talk about it. I've kind of had to pull it out, but the point is there's a value there that he sees this more than just, I want to be a nice guy and I want to win some football matches. It's just who he is at a DNA level, and that permeates everything. And then the other part that's kind of fun, because we were talking about competition, is he's just like, listen, this is what I'm doing. And I'm going to spend a ton of money and I'm going to hire the best players in the world and keep up with me if you can. So he's got the captain of Canada, captain of Japan, the best player in Norway. He's just like, this is what we're going to do. And I'm just going to keep winning championships and until you guys try to catch up with me. So it's just an example. I could give you, tons of them, but the reality is you have to have a partnership. There's too many things you do along the way from a creative point of view, a storytelling, different people, different reasons. There's just things you don't know along the way that you're going to encounter. That as long as you have that kind of basis and that say, hey, this is why we're both here. This is what we're both trying to get out of it. This is where we're both trying to go. That along the way, I think you just come to these amazing places that you can never have predicted.
Right.
Anybody?
And that tells me, Michael, that again, I think we have to be open to the opportunity, right? So it's not just, we can't just look for something specific. I say this to my players, and I think sports analogies are really great because, when I tell my players, who are the people who score goals? And they're like, forwards? And I'm like, no, the people who are ready. It's the people that are ready to score will score. And it doesn't matter your position. It just matters if you're ready. And to be ready, you have to see things that haven't even yet started to ruminate, and it's going to come. So be ready. Don't be sitting here thinking, oh God, I wish this could happen. And all of a sudden it smacks you in the face and then it's gone by. Right. So you have to see it, you have to feel it, you have to anticipate it, and you have to be ready. I think that is critical for all of us in all the things that we're doing.
It's fantastic. Yep.
I mean, Brandy, you're preaching. So.
Yeah, sorry. I get very excited. I apologize.
To absorb it. I love this. But being ready, staying ready when it's, time. So there's been a new energy in particular around the WNBA and I've seen the organization as a whole be ready for this growth, be ready to embrace that and invest more. But Kia, what in particular do you attribute to the growth of the WNBA in this year, this year in general?
Yeah, this year, the last, few seasons, really, I think it even touches on some of the things we already talked about. I always have to start with the game. I think the quality of play is phenomenal. It's elite, as I've said before, but more importantly, you have a generation of players who grew up watching WNBA players. So they were getting ready. They were ready. Yeah, so, exactly. It's like the basketball just continues to get exponentially better. And I think that's the entertainment side, right? Mm-hmm. We're primarily below the rim, but it is a strategic game. It is a pick and roll game. It is a high shooting percentage game. So that is what people are tuning in for. Speaking of tuning in, to Michael's point, more games on television, more channels where games are viewable, be it digital outlets on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. deals with ESPN, ABC, local channels. So it's just like, if you can see it, you can become a fan of it, you can grow your audience. And I think really, you know, I hate to always go so philosophical on these things, but taking a step back, I think a lot of the residual effect and the growth that we're seeing today is the league was a little bit ahead of its time. It was incredibly progressive 24 and a half years ago. Early on, we were early adopters of support for the LGBTQ community, really, you know, involved players who weren't afraid to roll their sleeves up and be in the community. It's like all of the things that we talk about as being the fundamentals of how sports teams do business. It's really done, it was done out of necessity in the WNBA for, you know, at least 20 years. And I think now the world is kind of, you know, in that same vein. Again, you know, Michael said we can't talk about this enough. You know, the world changed, and it's a good thing to be supporting women. And it's a good thing to say that you're supporting women and you're for women. And then it's a good thing to say it again. So, you know, I bask and love sitting in this space right now. You know, again, not to harp on all the nuggets that we've talked about on this call, but when you look at New York in particular, a franchise that, you know, we've been in flux, we had been in flux, we were moving, the franchise was sold, and then you land Sabrina Ionescu as the first time ever number one pick, and, you know, the first time Liberty had a number one pick. And then prior to COVID, we would have played our first season at the Barclays Center. You have to be ready for that moment. And you best believe, like, all of my focus right now is making sure that that growth stands true and comes out on the other side when we do have that opportunity to play there. But I think, you know, just the league as a whole is just steeped in some of these just fundamental things that I think all of us would agree are good for the world. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you know, a little bit more about the community work and the courage and bravery of the social justice work, again, that the WNBA led on. It was probably 4.5 seasons ago where they were standing up for Black and brown bodies who were being killed by law enforcement. They were using their platforms and using it in concert together, joining up with, you know, other teams to protest and to educate themselves, quite frankly. So I'm so proud of the outcomes that even revealed themselves in the Wubble this season. And, you know, again, the progress and again, commitment that the women have shown.
I guess
if I can say something, Ari, I think this is really something that cannot go we can't overlook it. And I feel like the women's side of sports has created a foundation built on community. And I feel like this is something that really should be our pin that we put here, or like it's our shining coat of armor. Like, we have always cared. We have always been there. We have always thought about development. And this was not oh yeah, we should be community involved. This is something I think that we have done exceptionally well. And we have been difference makers from the beginning. And so I think that could be like the loudest, boldest statement. We have always been here. Oh. That could be our statement for everybody. We have always been here. Mm-hmm. And we will continue to be here. No matter what.
Been on. Not new to this.
Yes.
And such kudos to the leaders within the W, right? So Kia, women like yourself, Kathy Engelbert, and so many other visionaries, that the WNBA PA as well. You know, and with our relationship with the W, it's been one that has just been really incredible. I know when you think about values and reasons why you get into partnerships with teams and leagues, you know, the WNBA was, you know, I know when the announcement broke about our official marketing partnership with the NBA, you know, a lot of folks were like, well, of course we assume you pick up the WNBA. And it's like, well, why is that? It's like, well, it's part of the, I'm like, this is not just some add-on, people. Like, this is a very intentional investment that we're making, and we co-created it with the league. So, it was about, listen, we want to be that first non-apparel brand to be on all 12 teams' jerseys. And we want to be the inaugural partner of the WNBA Changemakers because we want to support the women both on and off the court. And I got to tell you, with the WNBA draft, that was such an exciting point in time. I know everybody talked about the NFL draft and about being virtual, but let's be real. Kathy Engelberg brought it, right? Like, she was the first, virtual draft that went off this year in 2020. And I'll never forget, for us and our great partners over at ESPN, when we heard about the fact that they were going to broadcast on ESPN2, we picked up a few phones to say, listen, is there something we can do? Because this is, it's not just about the ratings, right? And certainly all the flywheel effect and everything we've already talked about, but this is about growing the awareness. There is going to be plenty of eyeballs out there that may not even know that this type of world-class, athleticism exists. And we want this to be out there for as many people to view as possible. And so lo and behold, it gets moved to ESPN, and the ratings prove itself. And certainly for us, we put our money where our mouth is, because we, I guess I can't say a number, but we certainly increased our investment on the draft that night with ESPN's change from ESPN2 to ESPN. So proud moments, right? These are decisions that we can impact, a couple phone calls. And so it's such a prideful thing to be able to see, your work and passion come into play.
Mm-hmm. And it does just take that one extra phone call to believe in it, to believe in the product. I think that heavily impacts everything. And shout out to the W, who did have record numbers this year, record numbers. And I just love to see it. And again, women's soccer and women's basketball were the guinea pigs coming into COVID. So, we just didn't know how it was. And everybody talks about the NFL draft, but the W did it a couple of days before. So love to see that. As far as branding, I know we've touched on the image maybe 3 times now, but we got to knock this out. How has the image and push of being a woman athlete changed since you were on that field? Not necessarily the image that you did, but just the image as a whole. Hey, I should.
You just happen to have the red shirt that has to go on.
It's my business card.
You carry them in your golf bag?
Yeah, I have them with me.
I'm sure I have 3 more questions about you in that image, but as a whole, symbolically, how has the image and push of being a woman athlete changed since you were on that field?
Yeah, I think number one was the good thing is, I can report in all honesty that the feedback initially from that moment was 99% positive, all in wow, was a tremendous example of athleticism and determination and all the other great emotions that come with playing sports. And there was some people who were saying, why did you do that? You're sexualizing sports. Women have come so far, and here's what you did. And I love those comments. Mm-hmm. I love those comments, because then I got to have a good, honest conversation and say, I hear what you're saying, but let me explain to you what it is like to be on that field and to be in that arena and to have put your whole life in that direction. And now this is the outcome. And so really for me, it was a chance to change some minds, right? To shift that paradigm of that thinking of, well, if a woman takes off her jersey, it must be about sex, or it must be about, femininity, or instead of about the things that go along with being in sports, like power and strength and, all those other things. So I love that. And I will say, to this day, we look at these athletes as athletes, right? It's not it's not a female athlete. It's not a male athlete. It's not a transgender. That is an athlete. And I feel like that has become the biggest, maybe prideful moment for me, is that we're getting farther and farther away from the stereotype and closer to what I felt when I was on the field, which is I was a great soccer player. And I worked in that direction for that name, I guess. And so I owned it. And I guess to be able to spontaneously have that moment told me that it was okay. And the people around me who were the closest to me, who embraced me in that moment, also confirmed that it was okay. And I feel like that was all that I needed to know that it was okay. And now other people got the chance to say it is okay, and it will continue to be okay, and it will be more the norm, right? Than it has been before. And so we've made strides, and that's what we have to continue to do, is push the envelope of people's acceptance. Just because it's the way it's been doesn't mean it's the way it has to be.
Athletes now have the ability to tell their own story, to market themselves as they want to be marketed, to show their full selves where they have been restricted in the past. But we'll start with Brandy, because, hey, you were viral before viral was a thing, worth mention today. Just talk to me about how people can leverage those moments that are viral or their social media in pitching themselves to the public.
Well, I think this is a tricky situation. And for me, because I'm kind of at that age where, I had a typewriter in college. So, I am like thinking about these things. Like sometimes they make me a little bit nervous because a lot of information can be put out, and obviously you always want to put your best self forward. And so Kia, I want to have a conversation with you, and Shiz with you, and Michael with you, about how can I have a workforce of your female athletes, and we can work in your spaces so that we can showcase the women that we have, and we can get them out there in the public sector to say, this is what strong women look like. Not athletes, not business women, but women.
Count me in. I'm totally down to
Awesome. That is
I
great.
think it's incredibly progressive in thought. And I don't think you got off topic at all. It's a complex situation, because even me as a leader of a team, I grapple with who I am personally on social media and who I am as the CEO of the New York Liberty and what I represent in terms of the organization. And in the same vein, we have players who are their authentic selves on their own platforms. And then I come to them with content series from partnership deals. And, we're creating stories and narratives, and we do our very best to do this sort of matching and to try to maintain as much integrity and authenticity as possible. But there is a very, very thin line. And sometimes you get, people way on this side who are overshares, and then you get people who are just inactive. So I think that's where oftentimes we sort of stand in the gap as the organization and lean on the brand to be the voice and the intention. And then we pick and pull on players, where we can and as needed, and lean on coaches and front office staff. But I absolutely love your vision for this sisterhood and this sort of conglomerate. I think what we've all been saying in a lot of ways is the ecosystem is working together. Back when I answered the question about the growth of the WNBA, like, to hear Shiz's passion as a partner in what she's been able to accomplish in partnership with the brands and people that she works with is a beautiful thing. Like, that's what you want. It's everything that a team or a franchise could ever ask for. And then you also add in the union, and you add in coaches and the growth on that side, and you add in the fans. At the end of the day, like, that has to be one ecosystem, and we all grow together, and we're all better for it when we're all kind of, communicating.
Just joining together as one ecosystem, strength in numbers to push this game forward, whether it be millennials, Gen Z, older, younger, it doesn't matter. We're coming together. We're putting the women on the forefront, and that's what's important right now. Thank you all for coming. This has been a great panel. The English major in me just wanted to take notes every single second of the day, but I look to you guys as the ones who are, making the proper investment and driving this game exactly where it needs to be. You're the innovators, you're the blueprint, and I thank you so much for your time. It's been great. This has been the Women in Sports panel, sponsored by AT&T. Make sure you look these people up, because they're the ones that are providing the visibility, making it happen for us, and we're forever indebted. Thank you so much.
Now, despite the ups and downs that this year has held, I hope that you've all found reasons to continue to celebrate. One of those reasons is that one of the greatest in the game of soccer, if not the greatest, Pelé, celebrated a milestone birthday last week. 80 years old, which I could not believe even when it was sent to me. Happy 80th birthday, Pelé. So we're going to continue celebrating to top off this amazing occasion. He's been awarded the 2020 Clio Sports Lifetime Achievement Award for outstanding contributions to the game of soccer and for paving the way for those who followed. So to present this award is another soccer great, Tim Howard.
Hello, my name is Tim Howard. Thank you to the Clio Sports Awards and Bleacher Report for having me here today to present the Clio Sports Lifetime Achievement Award to a true legend. Widely regarded as the greatest soccer player of all time, Pelé's career on and off the field has been the blueprint for many players that have come after him. His ability to create a legacy based on awe-inspiring talent, paired with a pioneering spirit towards enterprise and philanthropic endeavors, has permanently shaped sports culture and paved the way for new talent in the industry. Pelé created a brand that transcended ethnicity, religion, political preference, and was recognized in every country around the globe. He used his platform to create businesses, score multiple brand endorsements, raise funds and awareness for philanthropic initiatives, and chart a path to success for the generations to come. On behalf of the Clio Sports Awards, Bleacher Report, and all the wonderful fans around the world, I'm humbled and honored to present the 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award to you, Pelé. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I am honored to receive the Clio Sport, the Lifetime Achievement Award. I work very hard. This work was very important for me. Thank you, Clio, for making this possible.
Iberia Bank and First Horizon, both leaders in banking the sports and entertainment industry, have joined forces to create a leading financial services company dedicated to enriching the lives of professional athletes, coaches, and owners in all major sports.
Again, a very happy 80th birthday to you, Pelé, and congratulations again. Now moving on to our last, but certainly not least of the panels we have lined up for today, the future of storytelling in sports. Now we have marquee panelists lined up here to discuss everything around storytelling, including how athletes have seized their own narratives, including how technology can tell sports stories, and how sports marketers can stay on top of trends in order to stay relevant. All of this and more is right now in the future of storytelling in sports.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Nudd, Editor-in-Chief of Muse by Clio, and welcome to the Future of Storytelling in Sports panel. I am thrilled to welcome my panelists for today, Monica Ruski, VP of Marketing at Budweiser, Steve Stout, founder and CEO of Translation, and Gary Vaynerchuk, founder and CEO of VaynerMedia. Welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for being here. Also, congrats on your 2020 Clio Sports Award wins. Clio just announced the winners this morning. All of you guys won big at the show, so congratulations. Everyone watching can check out all of the winners of the Clio Sports Awards at clios.com today. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of that winning work during our discussion. So the future of storytelling in sports. The first topic I want to discuss is how athletes are really using their power to shape narratives in sports like never before, and how those narratives go kind of way beyond competition, whether it's Colin Kaepernick leading a national reckoning on police brutality, LeBron James and others bringing Black Lives Matter to the NBA bubble, Megan Rapinoe leading the fight for equal pay. These narratives are very dominant in sports today, almost as much as the stories around the games themselves. So we'd love to hear from all of you on this. But Steve, maybe first you could tell us, how critical do you think athletes are to the national conversation around these issues, and what should teams, leagues, and brands be doing to support them?
So athletes have always been a big part of driving this conversation. From Muhammad Ali to Jackie Robinson, Jack Johnson, Bill Russell, Jim Brown. They've always been driving that initiative during the civil rights era. And then today, you obviously have LeBron James driving that with the NBA and as a global icon. I think, obviously, I know today, these athletes have transcended the sport. They've become much bigger than life. They are driving popular culture. They are bigger than musicians at this point, what they've become. And as a result of that, they have the loudest voice. From a league perspective, I think the NBA, Adam Silver, has done a phenomenal job of allowing his athletes to be unfiltered in their point of view and how they feel about race relations in America. And the NFL has been very, very late. They did not handle the Colin Kaepernick issue well at all, and they felt it. Fans stopped watching them. Young people were turning away from the NFL as a result, and they kind of went into a drought as a result of their positioning, including infighting with their athletes for not allowing themselves to have the voice and express themselves. So I think that's that. From a brand perspective, I think the brand should be extremely supportive of this. If you believe in those marketing person, a CEO, and you believe in those values, then I would support those athletes and support those brands, because history will tell us you're going to be on the right side of right or the wrong side of right. Like, it's not like when this thing gets looked back in hindsight, you'll see who didn't want to support what was pro-equality. And if you don't support pro-equality, you can't hide from that, right? So that story is going to be told for you. So I think that if you're a brand that believes in equality and believes that people should be treated fairly, and you're looking for all of these places to put money right now because of what's happening in America specifically, then I would be putting my money in the NBA right now. Because I think the NBA is doing a great job of supporting equality and supporting the right side of morality on these issues. And that's where I'd be supporting them, because the more the NBA has support, the more their athletes can help make change.
Yeah, Gary and Monica, you guys worked on a fantastic campaign with Budweiser for women's soccer, closing the pay gap, the sponsorship gap, and the pay gap in women's soccer, which, by the way, has won 3 grand Clios at Clio Sports this week. So amazing work. Can you guys talk a little bit about that, and also, how important it is for brands to be in efforts like that? Monica, do you want to start?
Monica, you might be on mute.
Thank you.
Am I on mute now? No?
You're back.
Yeah. What? Hey, what's going on? All right. So, this campaign with Megan Rapinoe called Future Official Sponsor was something that we launched at the National Women's Soccer League finals of last year. And essentially was to raise awareness of the fact that the National Women's Soccer League, one of the major contributors to the pay gap between women and men in soccer is the lack of sponsors, right? So the more sponsors you have, the more money you have going into that ecosystem, the stronger their ability to close that gap. So we use that to sort of have a tongue-in-cheek approach to sort of raise awareness of the many things that are unsponsored in the National Women's Soccer League that many other leagues have, like watches, deodorant, beverage. And I think that for us was sort of the beginning of a full transition on how we are looking at sports moving forward. I think in the past, we would dabble in a little bit more of the fun side of marketing, or maybe just retirements, which all have a role and all are very, very important to bring what our brand stands for forward. Now it's about, similar to what Steve was saying, like how all these athletes, they transcend the sport. It's about having a point of view. We now realize that in each of these leagues, National Women's Soccer League specifically, we have to be in it and fight for the right causes. We can't just advertise. So that's sort of how we've now shifted our approach with all of the leagues that we work with. So Major League Baseball, NBA, et cetera, et cetera. So it's shifted sort of our dynamic. It's all about what impact we can make on the sport. And I think one of the biggest shifts I saw in this year is every once in a while when we'd work with an athlete, you'd get like a few of them saying, hey, what's your brand doing to help the league? Maybe once in a while you talk about some sort of cause initiative that they want you to be a part of. 100% of the time in this year, where everyone is incredibly aware of the need to be more human and help and all the divisiveness, 100% of the time, every single athlete, a part of the negotiations are which nonprofit are we donating to? And what point of view do you have? And if you aren't on the right side of history, or the right side of conversation, we actually won't do business with you. And that's been an interesting shift that we've noticed. But as a result of that, when you are on the same page, the work you're doing together is a lot more powerful and less transactional.
Gary, how do you talk to your clients about these kind of conversations about leading social causes in marketing?
I think Steve hit the moonshot in his opening answer, which is everything's being documented and everyone's going to have a conversation with their grandchild. And whether that grandchild is on a human level, you and your grandchild, or whether that's a brand that has to have a conversation with its consumer, the reality is that, both Steve's point about the iconic athletes up to LeBron James at this moment, or Monica from a brand standpoint, this is about attention and what one does with the attention. What Monica and our team realized was everyone loved the women's national team during the World Cup. And then literally the next day, I mean, when you think about the comps, you think about the devastating feeling. My great-grandma used to talk a lot about being Jewish in the Soviet Union, where like you would do something like win a Nobel Peace Prize, and the next day, after you went to Moscow, you'd get beat up in the shtetl, right? You think about the iconic entertainers and athletes, Black Americans through the years, who would be on the biggest stages and then not be able to, an hour later, eat at a restaurant after having, winning a gold medal like Muhammad Ali. Obviously not to those extremes, but the women's national team is like the heroes of the week. And then the next week they go to their league and there's 19 people there and zero funding. And so Budweiser was able to use its dollars and platform to bring that awareness. And brands have always had that because they've had the money to run commercials. What I think is incredibly interesting about today's world is LeBron James doesn't need Howard Cosell. Muhammad Ali was a genius. He hacked the media, right? He built relationships, and he was able to then use that platform to get out a proper message. Athletes don't have to be at the mercy of Bleacher or CNN or Fox or anybody. They have the platform with the social media infrastructure that we now live in, and that will trickle to every human being at every level. And so what I remind our brands and our clients about is everybody's in play. every opinion matters, which means in America, you will have two very distinct opinions. Steve talks about the NFL's troubles from doing a very poor job in supporting their players. Then when they tried to support, you had a whole nother half of the country deciding not to watch and support. That is now table stakes until there is a leader or an energy that comes to play, because everything trickles from the top, that has an interest to bring people together, which is not the current situation. And so that means, hey, good news, brand, you're gonna have 50% of the potential consumers upset one way or the other. Where do you want to be on this? Because that's how it's going to play out in a decade. But to Steve's outrageously proper point, this is going to be in mini documentaries. This is going to be in content in a decade from now. And how's your brand going to do when it's completely on the wrong side of history?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a legacy thing. It sure is. I want to talk about storytelling during COVID and how that has sort of changed things for you guys. Obviously, the sports come together.
Hey, Tim, I apologize. I think it's different than a legacy thing. I think it's a humanity thing that, I understand the context of what you're saying, but I think it's an important point. I think legacy, I definitely think about that, but, think about innovation and things of that nature. I mean, this is at its purest level, a humanity thing. And I think that's going to play out. I just don't know how people don't see that. Anyway, nonetheless, I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, to that point, Steve, what do you say when people say, I don't want politics in my entertainment, I don't want politics in my sports? People who say ratings are down because of that, what do you say to those people?
It's omnipresent. You can't get out of it. The athletes were in China. Let's not forget about that, right? Some guy retweets that in China. First of all, let's just deal with one thing that's very important. Everybody's personal Twitter handle is now officially corporate letterhead. You don't even realize that. So a guy retweets something which he believes strongly about, which is the rights of Hong Kong needing to be preserved. And then all of a sudden, everything gets blown up in the NBA. The players can't play in China. The Chinese don't want them there because one executive retweeted something, an opinion that the rights of the Hong Kong people should be preserved. He didn't intend for that to happen. It's omnipresent. You can't avoid it. So the idea that you think that you can stand on the sideline and maybe avoid all of this contact as a result of not saying anything, unfortunately, it's just not true. We're all in it. We're all in it. So, final point is, in this regard, if you're an athlete, you're an executive, you're anyone that works within the ecosystem of sports, as we're discussing here, you have an obligation to say and do what you believe is right. I think that's just the most important thing because it's going to happen anyway. As it relates to the people saying sit on the sideline and watch, that's what the NFL tried to do. It did not work. It just did not work. So it doesn't even you might as well, and when this all gets looked back on in time, you're going to see the people who did nothing about it, and they will perish, their legacy will perish, their kids will look at them funny because of it, or the next generation of sports fans won't mess with them as a result. All of these things are on the table. It's not like this is going to be solved in 5 years, but it will be solved over 50 years. And don't be surprised if sports as you understand it today, as it relates to which one's bigger than which, are not going to be determined by how they handle these critical times that we're through right now.
Tim, also, as somebody who's obsessive at reading comments on the internet to the tune of multiple hours a day for the last 15 years, let it be very clear to everybody who's watching. People are not saying, I don't want politics mixed in with my sport and entertainment. They're saying, I don't like your politics because it's not mine. I have tracked tens of thousands of accounts that have tweeted at Colin or LeBron or Dwayne Wade or all these individuals where they say, keep your politics out. I'm not watching the World Series. I'm not watching the NBA Finals. I'm not watching the NFL. I'm not watching. On the flip side, if you follow those accounts, when a college football coach does say something that they like, which is the other side of the opinions of the world, they retweet it and they put an incredible amount of I love this guy or gal and team. So what people are saying are, let there be no confusion. Nobody's saying I don't want politics in my content. They're saying I don't want your politics that don't align with my politics in my content, and period, end of story. And so that's the punchline. And 48% see it one way and 48% see it the other way. And you got 4 kind of in the middle. And that's the bottom line. And people are going to have to navigate through that.
Well, not only is that we know that to be true because that's what news has become, right? You watch Fox because it supports your politics, or you watch CNN because it supports your politics. And that's what people want. They want their politics to be expounded upon and amplified, not necessarily the points of views of others if they don't agree with their political position.
That's why the algorithm conversation is laughable. The algorithm's blind. All it does is affirms what you want. When people are like, oh, Facebook is doing this to me, or this is that happening to me. The same thing's happening with your remote control and the 50 cents that you spend on a newspaper. You're making that choice. Anyway,
Totally.
Monica?
Well, let's move on to COVID. Monica, you guys at Budweiser did the One Team campaign. Obviously, the narratives around sports themselves have changed crazy. Seasons were truncated this year. Lots of different narratives, in the games themselves, but also away from the field. Sports marketers coming together to sort of help people in real ways. Tell us a little bit about the One Team idea and how you see, what you've learned, I guess, from storytelling during COVID.
Yeah, so back in March when COVID sort of hit a boiling point, and then little by little all the leagues, put everything to halt, we realized, first of all, from a business standpoint, being in stadium, that's really big for beer sales, right? So that had a huge impact for us from just a business standpoint. So we really had to we're still to this day reimagining what this looks like in 2021. How do we compensate for it in other ways, right? E-commerce is one thing, and all these other types of innovative platforms. The second piece was literally the fact that as one of the biggest sports sponsorship companies, we had a lot of investments just frozen. And a big part of those investments are eyeballs on a stadium signage or eyeballs on a digital display. So the first thing that we did is we huddled with the leagues, the teams across all of our portfolio of brands. So it wasn't just Budweiser. It was Bud Light, Michelob Ultras, Natty, and essentially, I would say within 5 days, I would say the conversations with the leagues and the teams was 48 hours. We said, hey, we're sitting on millions of dollars that are not being put to use in the way that is probably good for business. However, let's put them to help. So long story short, the biggest threat with COVID was a big blood shortage because blood drives were not able to practice the social distancing. People were asked to stay at home. So there were all these empty stadiums that had all this space. And then we funneled our sponsorship dollars to actually pay for the logistics and operations of the blood drives. So we were able to save thousands of lives by creating these blood drives. And I think the biggest thing from a storytelling standpoint, and I can even liken this to what we did with Megan Rapinoe, is if you think about the path to the solution to the problem, it's actually very complex, right? A common person isn't going to say sponsorship dollars goes into the league and then it turns into money it's very complex. Same with the One Team concept. Blood shortage is going to impact people's lives. The whole ecosystem is complex. The cool thing about what brands can do is have compelling storytelling that's simple for people to get. So I think that was the biggest thing between the Megan Rapinoe out-of-home print campaign to this One Team concept that helped people to understand that part of being on the right team is going and donating blood, they don't need to understand how. It's just this heartfelt film that helped us to have a very clear role in solving a problem. So I think that's one side of it. Back to the first part, which is the business problem, right? Which is the fact that we are not actually like able to be in stadium. We really had to figure out new ways to hack that in-stadium experience. So there were two things we did with the Vayner team. One thing was around the Challenger Cup this summer. We did this free kicks for Bud. So we hacked the signage literally on the side of the field to give people an interactive way to win free beer based on how the game was being played. So in a non-COVID year, probably those banner ads would just literally say Budweiser, right? But because our ability to access, and to Gary's point, he talks about attention all the time, right? We have limited areas of attention to connect with our fans. So we're looking at like sign making now, and we're like, that is a valuable real estate.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole new appreciation for the stuff that we probably just overlooked all the time, right? And now we're looking at every single piece of real estate as a way to interact, engage, move the business. So we did that with the National Men's Soccer League. The Challenger Cup became a trending hashtag. And then we took a learning from that, applied it to the World Series just now. There's all these empty seats. We tarped a few of them, put some Budweiser cases, and we had this whole campaign called Hit the Buds that basically gamified the entire World Series experience, so that if the baseball actually hit the Buds, then people would win free
like
beer.
last night.
Literally last night it happened finally, and we were a number two trending brand right under the Bachelorette. So it's cool, and that's
something we
right?
all aspire to, Monica. Right? Anything that could get us closer to the Bachelorette.
No, it's a great point. Like being forced to experiment makes you, learn new ways. I mean, Gary, I'm sure with many of your clients, you were forced to explore new sort of experimental ways that you didn't have to before because you had sort of a game plan going in. Can you talk a little bit about your clients and how you've sort of told stories through them in COVID?
It's funny because being on this panel with Steve, which we haven't had the luxury to do too often, I look afar and I see his incredible shop plays in this arena as well. I think for everybody who doesn't just do the status quo, hey, let's take a brief from a client, have a strategist look at it, have a creative come up with an idea and pitch it, and let's launch it on television. This has been a transformational time period. That's exactly, for our company, and I think the less than a handful other kind of creative agencies, Steve's company being one of them, this is a good time because people became practitioners. I can't tell you how many people in the last 9 months have said things to me like, oh, this is what you meant, or, oh, I'm sorry for saying this to you, because now that people had time. CMOs and brand managers had time to actually touch things because we play in digital so heavily. People just made assumptions. They read a Wall Street Journal article about TikTok or Snapchat or Facebook feed or live this. People became practitioners. And so for us, it is a fluid model. We do have a speed element and a different distribution model and a different creative model, which fit these times. I mean, listen, there is an absolute time and place to spend real money on production. There's also a time and place not to. And I think everyone fell into a place of like always spending more money sometimes on catering than what they could have spent on that campaign to make it effective or efficient for their actual business instead of making that thing. So yeah, for us, it's been an interesting time because of the speed of communication. I mean, just think about meetings. You know how many hours were wasted sometimes by Monica and I's office trying to get us together versus text, get on Zoom link, bang it out, move on. I mean, this is a forever change, I think, for a lot of people. And so from our standpoint, it's definitely led itself to much more fruitful conversations because I just believe the biggest hidden thing that happened during this time is senior decision makers got a little bit closer to the reality of what OTT is doing right now, to the reality of what Instagram story ads, how they are underpriced, to the reality of what a TikTok influencer can do to their business, and not in reading it on Ad Age or getting award for it, but actually like just having the time to touch it.
Gary, I've just seen this too long in advertising. And Monica, you're on the brand side. You get this. You know, as I told you when we first got on, I was impressed with you when I first met you. Most people on the brand side, they do simply one thing: anything not to get fired.
Yeah.
So it's written about. They can just do it afterwards. They don't even know why they're buying Snapchat or why they're buying TikTok or why they're hiring that celebrity. All they know is that it's famous and they can't get fired for doing it because it's famous. And that is the worst part of advertising, because you don't hear what makes sense. You only hear what you think you won't get fired for. It's called bad idea. So that's number one. In COVID, for us specifically, we were fortunate with our client State Farm. We did the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, and we didn't have the ability to produce anything, so we used deep fake technology and did the State Farm ads with Kenny Mayne predicting the future. And during that period of time, because we had so much attention, that was like the first thing that was like the first delicacy that people had of sports again, and it worked really well. In fact, it's picked up some hardware, but that was the ability of creating without production, just using technology as our only tool. We had attention because, you know, there's very few things that cut through during COVID. So there's been a focus of attention on the things that mattered most to people, like that documentary. Not only did COVID hit in March, but you got to remember that when George Floyd was brutally murdered and that was captured, the combination of both of those things, I think, has done a lot to help move this country forward. But specifically as it relates to marketing, what brands were doing was calling a person like me, because I'm African American, saying, can I give you some money and do something to help the Black community? I have never in 15, 16 years of translation taken one nickel because I was an African American. I do not want to go through any side doors. I want to go through the front door. I deserve a seat at the big table. If I don't get that, I don't want it. I am not going to give somebody the opportunity to rent me in order to say they did something good. You know what? Go rent somebody else, not me. Then you have COVID, in which it allowed people to, like to Gary's point, pay attention. Pay attention to the tools that are going to cut through. You don't have the opportunity to produce big production, so how do you get small and pay attention to the nuances and the details that can make a difference, and how do you capture audience without spending money on big production? In the agency world, big companies would tell brands all the time they needed to spend money on this and that, because those are all the tools they had in the toolbox. So they were just selling the tools that they had, whether they were real or not. We, as marketers, had to build tools that were adapting to tomorrow. We don't have set tools in the toolbox. We have to actually create tools to solve needs as we go. That's what we do. That's what entrepreneurs have to do. We're not part of holding companies. We're part of building our businesses and not just selling stuff off the shelf because we have to. That stuff has been gone as a result of COVID. So all the big companies have lost their bag of tricks, which was legacy tricks that no longer work. So I feel like coming out of this, going into next year, that everyone realizing that diversity matters, and well-intended white people who never knew anything or had any racist intent in their hearts, realize I never realized how bad it was. I actually didn't know it was at that level. It's at that level. They were embarrassed for white people. I've seen this. That's good. That's a good thing. Then on the COVID, you accelerated what was happening slowly 1,000 times faster. Technology was going to be more important. You know, big production was wasted money. All of those things also accelerated. And I believe that the combination of that for our industry, specifically advertising and marketing, is setting us up for great things to come. I think the empathy, the human touch, listening, understanding diversity are the values and the ingredients that are going to start to heal not only this industry, but this country going forward.
Yeah, Steve, I could not agree with you more. I've been telling people, 2020 for me, at least from a brand standpoint, has really, I think overall people understand the importance of operating with empathy first, diversity. Everything was in a theoretical space for the most part. I think this year insanely accelerated that. It's the new way of doing business moving forward. If you are a brand that does not do that, you will not prevail. You will not succeed. It is the new table stakes. It is the new norm. And the piece on the production side of things, I think the old tools, the old toolbox, the high stakes like productions, that's what was slowing down brands from expressing who they are. And the thing that we've learned in this year is the things that are getting disproportionate attention, disproportionate PR impressions, social conversation, are literally the cheapest and fastest things we've done. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not like handcuffed to think in these high production. It's almost like COVID gave us the permission, even though it was always there, to operate this way. And what's accelerated now is people's comfort level. So, we have so many, we've put out 24 campaigns in this year, and we're not even done. And we have like 6 more. And I say 24 campaigns because, it's not always just a TV spot or a Super Bowl campaign. Sometimes it's just a hashtag campaign on the sidelines of a sport. And it's as effective. And you get to express what your brand stands for 3, 4, 5 times in a month, which is far more impactful, far more compelling from a connection standpoint with your consumer or a new consumer. So could not agree with you more.
How about the big budget TV commercials? Are we going to see less of those sort of in future based on how well sort of being scrappy it has been for people during COVID? Gary, what do you think about that?
I think it'll be a mix, right, Tim? I think it's a very similar conversation to, are we going back to the office? It's going to be a mix. I really believe that back to attention, right? There's so many ways to play it. Do you understand the distribution? Do you understand how to create contextual creative that will work well on the distribution? I think Steve's shop is incredibly strong in the last 15 years. We're picking people to be in the content that were more famous, I think, than the advertiser understood, thus creating an arbitrage that way. So I think that's where this is going to go. I think there's an opportunity to still spend a godload of money on production, but I just have a funny feeling it's not going to come in the form of 737 feedbacks around the coloring, or do we really need to go to this place to shoot it? I think people are going to be more thoughtful. I think you still may see some of the line items get to that level, but I also think that there's going to be 50% of the mundane TVC that is going to be done in a much more thoughtful way. I think it's hard to get excited going into 2021, putting a $1 million production together on something that is going to be in a commercial form running on remnant television. It has to be debated. I also think we have the emergence of OTT. I think Steve and I and the other kind of innovative leaders, as he pointed out, are thinking about the contextual nature of OTT commercials versus network television, and what is that going to mean? With the planning behind that kind of commercial, I could see. Let's use Steve's shop. What he does extremely well with State Farm. Does that mean there's 7 guys that are now going to be in the spot instead of 1 core leader of the face, because there's an understanding that they're going to chop it up regionally, and the guy who's the star in the heat might over-index better that in that market. But there's going to be different conversations happening, and I think that's going to create a lot more thoughtfulness. And so I do think people will be smarter about wasting their dollars, but I still think you'll see some pretty special spots that are going to cost some real money to produce.
Yeah, I mean, that segues into sort of technology. I mean, Steve, you mentioned the State Farm work that was everybody just loved it so much. And there's other technologies, AR, everything down to sort of new camera angles in the NBA. I mean, there's there's a lot of changes happening technologically. How do you, Steve, at Translation, how do you guys think about technology driving new forms of storytelling?
I mean, I think technology has always drove new forms of storytelling historically. And that's not going to change now. Great creatives always want new tools, new inspiration, and technology has been a part of driving those inspiring ways of creating, whether it's artists, recording artists, or visual artists. They rely on technology to push their creativity forward. I'm proud to be a leader in that. We have access through our, one of our investors is Andreessen Horowitz, and they're a big tech investment fund. And we get to see a lot of best-in-class technology before any other typical agency would. And as a result of that, we get a chance to get into those tools early to help write our stories, and more things become possible as a result of that. Now, that doesn't necessarily replace big budget commercials all the time. Sometimes that technology is part of those big budget commercials. And, you know, sometimes that technology, you can take old footage and replicate it and change it and make it work just through the technologies available to do things like that. So that's how I feel about it. But, you know, just to get my point of view on big budget commercials, I do think there's going to be a mix of them. Some companies have relied on that. A lot of editing studios where guys are sitting in editing suites for 10 days, you know, costing a bunch of money and basically vacationing, it looked like, you know, arguing over different hues of blue. That was unnecessary, but it was an industry standard that people accepted, or everybody going to Los Angeles, staying at the Shutters because it was a great place to vacation and you can actually give it a preview before you took your family. Like on production budgets, those days are over with. So when I say big budget, let's just be clear. I think all of the panelists would say much more efficient spending at getting quality, much more efficient spending. Whether it's $2 million or $250,000, you want to be much more efficient in your spending at getting quality. There's that Budweiser commercial, Bud Light commercial that you guys have now, that InBev has now with the cardboard cutout, is a highly produced commercial that is absolutely phenomenal, that will fall under the bigger budget category, that looks like money well spent, because I think it's brilliant. Just have to give InBev a shout out there with that spot.
I love that too. It also comes down to the craft of the storytelling, right? You're like the emotion, like something what Nike does with You Can't Stop Sport. I mean, you know, a lot of that work is done in the editing room, but the storytelling, the emotion is incredible. I assume that that's going to be central to all storytelling in sports going forward.
Tim,
it's an emotional business.
Tim, this has been played out in Hollywood for decades. We've seen movies that are very low cost be remarkable. We've seen very big, you know, budgets be massive disasters. We've seen advertising is like the last to figure this out. In Hollywood, it is very understood that you can spend $1 trillion and it could be Waterworld and flop, or you can make Dallas Buyers Club and it can be Monster. In technology world, it is very understood that you can build a 10-person team with very little money and build Instagram, or you can spend $1 trillion and build Quibi, and 6 months later it's gone. For some unknown reason, advertising has not been able to figure itself out to understand that, yes, it is true. Not every $2, $3, $4, $5 million production commercial is automatically going to be good. This notion that the production cost and value guarantees success, storytelling is always the game.
Of course. You know, the other thing I wanted to ask you about. Sorry, go on, Monica.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to say, like, I think one of the biggest things for us is it's so liberating not to be precious about every single thing. I think you need to find like the one or two things that you absolutely should be precious about and make those exceptional and amazing, and then really embrace speed and not having to, part of perfection is also being raw. And I think that's one of the biggest things. If you think of how consumers consume content, the content they're looking at is something very raw on their Instagram, right? Insta stories to Insta Live. Like people are very comfortable at looking at different degrees of sophistication on editing and craft. So it's literally like we just need to respect the fact that they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay if like that blue has only been reviewed one time or two times, or if that audio mix is just not perfect. Like that time you spend on perfecting something that does not need to be perfected is just time away from more work that's going to grab people's attention. And so
who gets to be the judge and jury? I'm sorry, Monica. And who gets to be the judge and jury of perfection? I mean, you know, one thing that is just so fascinating is these are human subjective calls. I mean, and we sit there. I mean, I've literally watched people. If you count up the people in a room and you understand what the hourly wage is, spending tens and tens and tens and thousands of dollars on the perfection around an adjective. It's silly. Yeah.
One other thing I want to discuss with all of you is sort of the bottom-up nature of storytelling today. You know, when there was only a few media channels and, you know, only a few people had power to disseminate, you know, things, that it was very top-down. Now you've got thousands of fan accounts and there's so much coming up, bubbling up from the bottom. Curious how you guys sort of manage that. I mean, very few industries move at the speed of sports. How do you guys digest everything coming up from the bottom, you know, to advise your clients or as a client to sort of latch onto that, if they're trends, if they're current events? I'm curious if you guys have strategies for sort of managing the flow of content.
There's one way to do that. There's one real way to live it. You got to live it. You can't visit it. You can't borrow it. You can't, you know, glean from it. You got to live it. You have to live it yourself as the lead, or you have to hire people that specifically live that. You know, with sport, I would just say with sport and music specifically, trying to get people who don't do that to do that temporarily, it always sucks. It always comes out bad. It's the language of sport, the language of music is so specific that unless you are inside of it first, that's the only way you can speak to outsiders of it. But if you're never in it, it's impossible to do. At least that's been my experience, because I've seen people try that. Like, I don't really like sports. I don't like sports. I don't watch sports, but I'll take a crack at it. And they'll do you know, we're going to do something about the NFL, and it's going to be, you know, old school NFL stuff. And then, but Darryl Strawberry somehow is in it. I'm like, how'd you put him on the Jets? He's on the Mets. It's like, you see a lot of bad things like that. So that's how we do it. Really hire people who love it as their passion and empower them to create, whether it's music or sports. That's how we do it. Period. Okay. Full stop.
Gary, how about you guys?
You know, we got lucky, or not lucky, depending on how you want to look at it. I came in so raw and cold into this industry, I didn't realize things were top down. Tim? I didn't realize that people made decisions in boardrooms with fake reports and weird focus groups and Ipsos test and all this garbage that runs the industry. I only came from consumer feedback. You know, I built my dad's wine business on wine forums, you know, and MySpace. And then, you know, Vayner was built on listening and speak. Like, we don't even live in any other world. You know, I think Steve nailed it on the opening line. Like, either you're about it or you're not. Like, you know, and the way I see that is speed. I think Steve's talking about the context of culture, which is imperative to his point. Watching, sometimes people come in and mispronounce the rapper's name and you're just like, okay, it's over before it started, right? Like, you can't even have the conversation. I think on the flip side, the way I interpret your question, our strategy department lives in an environment of this second. We are more of a breaking news organization than making a film organization. I think that a lot of people in marketing make films. They think it through for months, and then something comes out. For us, our DNA is breaking news. Something happens, you make something. You go on air and you talk about it, and which is why we've always been so centric to social media context, because that is the environment where that plays out. We also are a mature state at this point, 11 years in. We think a lot about post-creative strategy, the context, the analytical and qualitative feedback loops. So we've gotten much stronger at it, because now it's not just the creation of the content based on what's happening this second, it's understanding it an hour later and a day later to make the next informed piece of creative work. And so that's a big part of our DNA.
Yeah, Monica, you must have an interesting point of view on this as a legacy marketer who was, sort of, as Gary said, sort of making films, and now you guys are deep into social listening and all that stuff. What's your perspective on sort of, dealing with the bottom up storytelling in the industry?
Yeah, I might be a little bit of a unique situation because I also don't come from a traditional background. I come from the music industry, right? I was a recording artist, music producer, and so it's tough for me. I can't think in I just can't think in the constructs. I can understand the role of them. I can understand the role of Ipsos and all that kind of testing. When you think of like Super Bowl, where it's $10 million in media, $2 million. Okay, like just do the test to make sure like your gut is strong enough. But I don't know, with Bud specifically, I joined the team back in 2016, and that's really with the partnership of VaynerMedia. It was a beautiful harmony of people on my team that didn't think in constructs with his team that is just known for hacking and all those sorts of things. That it wasn't tough, because I think within our organization, when you have a brand like Budweiser that transcends just the beer, is a big part of American DNA and storytelling, we almost had a permission to act differently, to do firsts. And luckily we have leaders at the top that are fearless and comfortable with not having to think about the color blue on XYZ can. Like, they're just kind of like, go transform the business, make sure that we're here for another century long. So I know it exists. It's just not the world that I'm familiar with. And I'll say one last thing for us is, back in 2016, I remember joining, and we would spend so much time on a TV spot. And TV is now literally the last thing we think about. It's the thing that takes the least amount of time, if that makes sense. We're now more focused on culture. What are people talking about? What's interesting? And where does Budweiser have a very clear point of view to chime in? And we think of the idea there. Then we think of this like amorphous, interesting concept that gets us excited. And then we figure out what channel it needs to go on. That's like the last thing. Whereas before it was, we have TV spot. What should be the TV spot? And you just abandon every other point of attention. It's not the way it is anymore at all.
Okay. We only have a couple more minutes, but I wanted to ask all of you if there's a brand out there that you admire that you don't work with, who's doing great things in sports marketing. Steve, do you want to take that one first?
I think Kia has done great work with basketball, sports marketing. I think the way they used Blake Griffin was amazing. I was always envious of that work. As I said, I love the Bud Light spot that they have right now. I think just Budweiser and Bud Light has done a very good job of how they utilize sport. And then even go to Michelob Ultra. I think positioning the everyday athlete, finding the everyday athlete, the athlete in everyone that wants to, weekend warrior on a low carb lifestyle. I think that's super smart. Those are probably the ones, Kia and Budweiser and Bev. I think they do it the best. Yeah.
Gary, how about you?
I'm weird with advertising. this is always, as you started the question, I'm like, oh crap, because I really am not great at being up to date with the ecosystem. It's not a strength of mine. What I can tell you is, meaning from the advertising spot, because it's so much of, I'll give you, it's funny where my head went. Oh crap, I don't know that much work, because work a lot of times is television, and I'm just not I just don't end up consuming a lot of TVC. Actually, let me give you a couple of weird answers. I thought what the NFL did with and I don't know, and I'm not sure which brands took advantage of this, but the split screen of not going away from the game. This is just a television commercial innovation that I think is something people need to think about, that the split screen, because, my Jets and Steve's Cowboys are really struggling this year. So after a bad defensive outing or an awful 3-and-out for the Jets, when the programming now goes to a split screen, I'm really paying attention to, are my coaches holding my players accountable? Who threw their helmet down and gives it, crap, which I need as a fan that's struggling? Like, I'm watching for those things. So my eyes are still on the TV screen, which has subtly made me see the commercials in an environment that I would have never seen, because I would have went to my phone and looked at Twitter to see if any of the beat writers picked up on anything on the sidelines, because that's actually what I was watching. That's something, I think Monica and I have been working on a ton of localization campaigns. The other place my head went was whoever's making the most stuff sell. To me, it's not about the subjective opinion of me on, did I like that spot, or was that a great move? I think Steve's point on Blake, like integrating the product into the slam, that's smart. That's hacking the attention graph, and people are seeing that. That's smart. To me, there's also, for all of this, because that's my lens on this is business, is the comma. The whole game for me is the comma. Comma, did that lead to, we were just awarded these incredible awards last night, and we're on this morning on the text thread, and I literally replied to my team, I'm like, how's the work attributed to sales of Budweiser? Can you give me an answer? And I'm always raining on my creatives parade. They're always mad at me because they're all like fired up. They got the hardware. They said, I'm like, yeah, tell me about that. Like, that's just the truth. So I'd say any brand that can black and white show that the creative is driving to a positive business result, I think is good sports marketing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Monica, how do you feel about another brand or two that you admire in sports marketing?
I'm weird like this too. Like I'm not like an ad junkie in that I like explore all the time. Cause there's a little part of me that doesn't want to be looking at the side. I kind of want to just be looking in and up. So I bet there's a lot of work out there I admire. I can always find something I admire and everything. I think from a craft standpoint, I think for me, Nike is one of the what they just released, right? The nothing can stop what we can do, that ad. When I was looking at that editing, it made me fall back in love with a part of the craft that sometimes you don't even think about, right? It kind of reminded me of being back, in the music industry, back in the studio, and there's just like nothing like an amazing engineer to make a song fundamentally different, but no one even knows that side of it, right? So I think Nike, from a craft standpoint, what they did this summer was genius, brilliant. I've never had editing make me want to cry. The editing made me want to cry. I think what Tide did a few years ago at the Super Bowl, hacking the attention that the game does, was awesome. Like, that makes me constantly think of hacking attention. That to me was amazing. I think, when brands do things that are contextually relevant, I think like what State Farm did, that to me is also great, awesome. And, even though you can't run that ad for, a long extended period after that, again, the ROI on showing a consumer you got them in that moment and understood them will have a disproportionate return than a generic ad that can run for 5 or 6 months. So it's things like I can fall in love with very specific things. I think overall what I appreciate that I'm seeing is a lot less advertising. And I think that's the biggest shift that needs to, if you're a brand that still thinks in advertising terms, like you really gotta take a hard look again at how you're doing your work, because like at this point, brands need to look at themselves as entertainment companies. You need to make sure that you are respecting people's attention and you're respecting what they care about. You're not disrupting them, and a good proportion of the work you do drives your business. I don't think 100% of it has to. I think a good amount needs to nourish the brand and make sure people understand what you stand for. And you better stand for something very clear. You can't be on the sidelines. You have to be very clear. However, you got to move the business.
Very well said. I'll throw one in there. The Mullen Lowe campaign for Change the Ref. Joaquin Oliver was a high school student who was killed at Parkland, and his parents run this organization, and they made a cardboard cutout of Joaquin, and he's been touring during the baseball season. That cardboard cutout toured different stadiums, and to raise awareness of gun violence. And to me, everything conceptually, executionally was just incredible. I mean, baseball is America's pastime, and this campaign suggested that maybe gun violence is as well, and shouldn't be. So I wanted to give those guys props for that as well. Anyway, that's all the time we've got.
Monica, I'm sorry. The fact that you just said what you said about editing and that feeling that you got from an engineer in the studio is exactly how I feel. And very few people you meet talk that way. Understand the value of an edit in a movie or a film, and the quality of an engineer in a studio and what he does to a song to change it, transition it, to make you feel it in your chest. And it's a very, very similar feeling that very few people have gotten that deep in both industries that can connect those two feelings. I happen to be one of them, but there's very few people you speak to that understand that. That's awesome.
You know what's awesome about that moment for me is listening to these two that went deep in that world. It's exactly how I feel about the context of creative and social. In the same way that these two genuinely understand on both sides of music and advertising what that feeling is how I feel every day when I watch creative in the social media channels, when 99.9% of brands are 100% tone deaf of understanding the contextual aspect of LinkedIn versus Snapchat. But this is actual editing. This is post-production contextual to make it flow. Literally the cropping of the images, understanding sticker culture, overlays, like genuine copy support. I mean, the industry is completely mailed in copy, supporting social media creative, completely mailed it in. So it was really interesting listening to them, because I'm like, okay, I definitely don't understand to the depths of probably both genres, by the way, of those two, but I understand what they're saying, because meanwhile, over here, nobody talks about, I laugh when people think the craft of making a TVC is superior to the craft of making a social media post. I laugh. I genuinely laugh. I think people have completely been naive to the contextual production storytelling required across the board, because Pinterest is incredibly different than Instagram, especially when you talk, if we're going to use music terms, the psychology of when you're consuming it. What mindset are you in? Somebody listening to hip hop versus jazz is in a different mindset when they've decided to make that choice, when they hit the play button. When you're in LinkedIn's feed, you're in a very different mindset than you are when you're in TikTok's feed. And there is absolutely no contextual storytelling and editing in social media creative today, which is the elephant in the room why so many people can't win on the platform.
We're going to have to leave it at that. Guys, this was a really fascinating conversation, and we appreciate your time so much. Gary, Steve, Monica, wonderful to see you guys, and appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a healthy week. Bye, everyone. Cheers.
A big thanks to our co-hosts for this event, Bleacher Report. Also, check out all the 2020 Clio Sports Award winners just released this morning at clios.com. And stay tuned now for the announcement of the Fan Favorite Award, recognizing the year's best sports commercial according to you. Thank you guys for watching.
That'll just about do it for our first day, but such a powerful first day. So many powerful messages, powerful recognitions. And speaking of that recognition, as promised, it's time for the Clio Sports and Bleacher Report Fan Favorite Award. We're looking at some of the best in sports commercials over the year that you, the fans, voted on. But before we unveil the winner, we've got to take a look at the nominees. New Balance, Reign Over LA. Netflix, The Last Dance. Nike, Never Too Far Down. AT&T, The Codes We Live By. Adidas, This Is Home. Beats by Dre, Unleashed. EA Sports, The Lamar Takeover. Jordan, Why Not? And Nike, You Can't Stop Us. Like I said, it was voted by you, the fans, and the winner with over 40% of the votes, the 2020 fan favorite goes to...
Nobody does basketball like the 2-1-2. Go facts. Nobody gets louder than the 2-1-5.
Period. The 7-1-3 is coming in hot.
Louder than the 2-1-4?
Nobody's colder than the 3-1-2.
What? Y'all bugging.
310 is all about the rings.
Right now, Showtime is in the 2-1-3.
The game we live for, the codes we live by.
Mr. Burns, I'm out here in the 541. You might not even know where that is. It's on the Oregon coast. And you would not imagine what arrived on my doorstep today. Well, it's a fan favorite Sport Clio, presented by Bleacher Report and Clio Sports. For our NBA work together, the codes we live by. What do you think of that?
That is pretty unbelievable, Chaucer. Congratulations to you and the translation team and to the incredible people on my team at AT&T that worked on this. Winning awards is always great, but awards that are voted by the fans are the absolute best. So really psyched for everyone to win this, and thank you to everyone involved.
It's really great to be ratified by the fine people of the 313, the 213, the 212, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Couldn't be more grateful for your partnership, Mark, and for the recognition from the people that we ultimately serve. Cheers.
Congratulations again to Translation and AT&T. That spot featured some of my favorites. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow as we kick off day 2 of the Clio Sports and Bleacher Report's virtual event, the new Sports Marketing Playbook. I want to thank again our official sponsors and our partners. Check them out one more time: AT&T, Iberia Bank, First Horizon, and Aquimo. And our partners, Excel Sports Management, Octagon, Athlete by Impact, and Society Awards. Thank you again, and for everybody at Clio Sports and Bleacher Report, I'm Kristen Ledlow. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Don't forget to check out the other 2020 Clio Sports winners at clios.com.